Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Oregon State Board of Education November meeting. Lisa, let us go ahead and do the roll call.
Mahina Novoa.
Here.
Jocelyn Arenas Alvarez.
Here.
Thank you. Heidi Sipe.
Here.
Treasurer Reed.
Here.
Sherry Helt.
Present by video.
Director Skurlock.
Here.
Director Russell.
Here.
Director Colonna.
Here.
Director Valise.
Here.
Second Vice Chair Wheeler.
Here.
Vice Chair Zapata.
Here.
Colt Gill.
Here.
Chair Howard.
Here. Right, everyone. So we are going to go ahead and start with board member reports. I would like to go ahead and start with board member Valise.
I knew you were going to call me first for some reason. Buenos dias, everybody. It's a beautiful day here in Woodburn, Oregon. I'm not sure what it's like in the rest of the state, but I'm definitely got a lot to be grateful for. I'm here with all of you, and I've got to see two amazing students, hear about what's going on with them. So I feel really blessed today to be with all of you, considering all of the hardships that Oregonians across students and families are facing, not only in education, but obviously with the pandemic and the fires. My only check-in is this, just well wishes really to all Oregonians. And again, thank the Oregon Department of Education, the staff at all the school districts, the obviously classified, certified, and folks like Heidi and all of the leadership, right, in these unprecedented times. I ask all Oregonians to have, like we say, grace and patience with all of us. We all are in this together. And I know that these next 2 weeks will be challenging for some, but I know that if you looked at the numbers, they're getting pretty bad. And if we all do our part, I think we can save lives and at the very least, minimize any type of heartache, because the disease, COVID-19, is real and it does impact people. I'm working on a professional level every day in trying to prevent that in the Latinx community. And I've heard hundreds and hundreds of stories. It's not just one person or two people. It's literally hundreds and hundreds of people, because that one person who gets sick or might be sick has a domino effect in whether it's quarantine or actually those folks actually going to the hospital end up in ICU. So that's my message, on my front. Again, thank you everybody for being here today, and I hope everybody out there is well. And I appreciate everybody's patience and leadership across Oregon, especially the students, for their, I can't even imagine what it would be like to be a student in K-12 or even higher ed at this moment. And I'm sure we've heard before we went on live that it is challenging. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Valise. I also remembered, and one of the reasons that I was late was that I had asked everyone if they felt comfortable to share what the season of autumn means to you as the leaves are falling off the trees. The colors were, last week, and then all of a sudden the trees are bare. What does that mean? And then we go into this next week of this national holiday that we call Thanksgiving, that has so many different origins and a lot of challenges and complications associated with it in terms of our history. So I don't know, Director Valise, if you have anything to share about the season that we are in as well. If not, we can also come back to you, but I wanted to make sure I forgot that we were going to do that.
Come back to me, quit picking on me, Chair Howard.
Okay, we'll come back to you about that. Let's go ahead to Treasurer Reed.
Well, thanks for letting me jump in. I obviously did not hear the assignment on the seasons, but I actually can say something about that because fall is always my favorite, typically because the beginning of the school year is a place to feel all of the possibility and the energy that comes as a new school year starts. And also it's that great time when there is the end of baseball season, the beginning of football and basketball. It's sort of maximum sports, which I like as well. The other thing I guess I would share for this group is just the interesting experience I'm having as both a person involved in policy making as an elected and as a parent of school age kids in the Beaverton district. Our daughter's a 6th grader and our son is a 2nd grader. And to watch that as both a parent and an observer and a somewhat sort of learning coach and all of that, there's a lot going on. And the challenges that educators are facing are significant, as are those of families, particularly those who are also trying to work. And I have a lot of advantages that a lot of people don't, some of which I didn't earn, but it's hard for everybody. And so just to reiterate that, and I know that's something everybody here knows, but it's pretty striking every time we confront it. So I'm glad to be here and appreciate all your work.
Thank you, Treasurer Reed.
You.
Student Representative Arenas.
First of all, I'd like to say I'm really happy whenever we have board meetings. I love to see all your guys' faces and just lightens my day so much. And then secondly, I think fall for me, I think it's always a time of marking a time of rebirth to come. So like what I like to do during the fall season is just reflect upon my year and see where I can improve for the next. Even if that's in the most smallest way possible. It's more of like giving back to my community and realizing that these are the hardest moments within my community because work has gone down and then a lot of them don't have like opportunity to bring meals to their family. So that's one of the biggest things that marks my view of the seasons of holidays. I really like to make sure that everybody in my school is having a meal to enjoy during Thanksgiving and during Christmas, because I know a lot of my peers aren't able to enjoy those meals. And not only that, but just the mental aspect of holidays can be really draining on a lot of students. And so going into these seasons, I like to just recognize that not everybody has the same family dynamic that a lot of students are fortunate to have, because a lot of them are unfortunate to have nothing at all. And so that's one thing I would like to recognize. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Let's go ahead to Director Colonna.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On the autumn piece, I sent to Madam Chair a poem from Parker Palmer. Actually, I'd say it's more of an essay, wouldn't you, than a poem? And the name of it is Autumn, and it's from his book, A Hidden Wholeness. And I would like to send it on to Lisa and then have her send it individually to all of you. It is extremely well written, and it gives a feel of there is a hidden amount of energy and life just below the soil, getting ready to come out. And the beauty of the words are really great. So I will send that on to all of you as part of my autumn autumn ideas. I wanted to send my appreciation on to all the ODE staff and all the public educators across the state as we deal with this milestone of 250,000 people dying of COVID as of today. And one of the things that I think that is so difficult about it is, as all of you know, because the disease is so infectious, that when people finally are in the hospital, in really bad shape and going on to ventilators that they're not able to be with or actually see any of their family members or friends. And I've often thought one of the most difficult things of all to deal with would be to die alone. And so for the people and their loved ones, it is a horrible, horrible situation to go through. There are some positives, and one of the great positives on November 2nd was that 15 out of 18 school district voters passed bonds during a time when many are out of work and we're in an economic crisis. And the fact that an overwhelming margin passed those bonds with pretty significant margins of victory is really amazing at this time. I did not guess that that was going to happen. And it says something really good about public education in our state. I also like this piece, and I know that most of you know about this, but in Multnomah County, voters supported a preschool for all, a ballot measure that will make preschool available to the youngest learners in Oregon's most populous county. What a great thing. So that was really positive. And I also want to thank again the department and the legislature for Oregon School Capital Improvement Matching Grants. That's where districts, I believe, get up to $4 million if they pass a bond. And most of these districts did qualify for that. And for many of the smaller districts, it's the difference between passing the bond and not. As we went through the letters last time that came to the board, and this time, again, I'm just very impressed that so many people would take time to write really, really good, intelligent, caring letters to us. I feel like they are heartfelt. There are no form letters. We have a lot of people in medical caregivers and doctors that are giving us their thoughts and ideas. And I just wanted to go through a few of the highlights to mention things that I felt made me think. One is from Abby Feltz. It was the idea of having a frontier metric where counties with less than 2,000 people, Wasco, Sherman, and Gillum, may have a little bit different situation than others to consider. A difficult question in my mind was from Amy Fetch. How is daycare different than going to school, especially when schools are housing private daycare centers? That's a difficult question to resolve. There was a really neat article that was linked to Emily Dayton's letter. It was about Rhode Island, one of the states in the United States that seems to be really making progress in their back to school movement. The governor did some things that I haven't seen in other states. One was to put all schools on a single calendar. I know that's a drastic move, but sounds like it's well coordinated. And then just only for staff and students, rapid testing sites. And also just for staff and students, statewide contact tracing system that's in place. So Rhode Island's doing some things that are working for them. We had some great student letters and even one from a 6th grader that I thought showed a great deal of thought. I want to recommend to the rest of you something that we found, and it was also with something that a person who wrote into us suggested, and that is NASA did a study on HEPA filters, and originally it was thought that they were not being able to take COVID virus particles out of the air, and they found that they do, and that they are successful. And New York City schools bought 30,000 of them, portable filters, portable filter units that they put in individual classrooms. So we bought one ourselves for our house. And I'm not trying to push any brands or anything, but the one that we got was Consumer Reports' #1 suggestion, and it's called Blue Air. So if any of you feel as though you'd like to install a HEPA filter in your own house, you can do that with that portable unit. I was moved by a letter from Larry Dickinson where he said, "I know you give them food, but they have to be in the classroom and also loved." And so many of the letters talk about the pain that both the caregivers of the children and also the children are going through. I'm hoping that the vaccines can really make a difference for us being able to get students back. And then I'd like to end with one comment from a person, and just something that maybe Director Gill could get back to me on, especially. It was a letter from Rick Breckler, and he said, "Thank you if you actually read this. Most of us who are ready for schools to open safely do not feel listened to at all." And so the question that I have about that is, do we have some system of thanking people who are sending letters to us to let them know that we appreciate them taking the time to do so? I know that what they're asking and what they want to have done is a whole different category, but it's just showing the caring and the appreciation of the time that was spent to respond to us. And with that, I will thank everyone for being a part of this and to allow me also to be a part. And I look forward to our time together today. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Director Colonna. Let's hear from Student Representative Novoa.
That's definitely hard to follow up after. But for me, I would have to say the holiday season, and especially fall. Sorry to be like the Debbie Downer, but it definitely brings back sad memories. I grew up, and my majority of my childhood was in shelters. So holidays bring back shelter Thanksgivings and shelter presents and things like that, which was pretty cool. But it brings back memories of my mom being super strong and trying to persevere through it and trying to make the holidays seem as normal as they could, because they weren't normal for me. But definitely now things have changed. I'm trying to make new habits, new holiday fun activities. It's kind of hard since we're in COVID now, but being in a whole nother home and being with a whole nother family, it's definitely a different experience. But I won't be able to go visit my mom this year. She won't be able to come visit me for Thanksgiving or Christmas. So that's kind of hard. But I mean, there's not much I can do about it, but she's definitely, we talk every day. Holidays are, like I said, they're pretty rough for my family, but it was always the sense of coming together, no matter if we're fighting or not. I have a big Mexican family, and there's always chisme. There's always chisme. So that means drama. Like there's always something to talk about. But holidays always pushed everything to the back burner and made it enjoyable for my family. And definitely with those traditional dishes, that was always fun. One of my monumental ones of my childhood would be my grandpa's Salvadorian rice. I love that man specifically for his rice. But now, like I said, I'm making new traditions. This year would be the second year that I participated in a holiday card, which is kind of weird. You know, those holiday pictures and they say Happy Thanksgiving. Me and my mom, honestly, we used to make fun of those pictures and like, you know, who sends out holiday cards? And now I'm in one. So it's kind of funny for my mom to get it in the mail because then she just makes fun of me. But other than that, a positive note, I actually was involved in advertising or pushing for the KGW News toy drive. So I will be on the news today in the morning at 4 o'clock and at 7. So definitely go watch me. I might be stuttering and I might be super nervous and you can see the fear in my eyes, but it was definitely a great experience. I mainly was brought into that situation due to the fact that I do have a rough upbringing. And I expressed, you know, during these times, I am a senior and I am working currently, but the money that I do have goes to helping support my mother and paying for the few bills that I have. So I'm not able to buy a lot of like graduation gifts for myself or a lot of things like that. So I had reached out and got connected with Angels in the Outfield, and they thought my story was pretty amazing. So they connected me with KGW News, and we are pushing or having me be the advocate for donating this season for the toy drive. It was definitely a monumental time in my childhood to receive toys from strangers. It was fun, and it was definitely something that you couldn't ask for 101 times. So you got what you got, which is always pretty fun. But yeah, that's what the holidays bring up for me. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Student Representative Novoa. Thank you very much for sharing, and good luck, break a leg on the news. Let's hear from Superintendent Representative.
Good morning. I'm thankful to be here. And Mahina, I just want to thank you. I was just sending you a note, but I'll just say it instead. Thank you for bringing the realism to the meeting today. So many of our families and so many of the families in my district, holidays are a very complicated time, and it's hard to bring voice to those. And I appreciate your willingness to do so for all of us. That's beautiful. One of the things that I am experiencing, working through, et cetera, right now is that duality that parents are facing of wanting their students in school, wanting them to be back to normal, and also being very fearful of their safety, and trying to balance all of those concerns is a real challenge. And my email box is full of parents between OSAA and the state board and governor's task force and just some various opportunities that I'm participating in right now means that I get to hear so many perspectives. And I do share Jerry's concern of people feeling unheard, when in reality, I read every one of those emails. However, I have found one and it creates a back and forth dialogue that I can't keep up with. And then important communications. I just want to make sure that people do know that they are being read and they are appreciated. And just really fall for me, I'm an October birthday, and so fall for me is always a time of celebration, because I believe in never begrudging a birthday, because aging is a privilege denied to too many. And so I really think that it's important to celebrate those milestones. And in the midst of all of this COVID, I hope that we can all find joy in the small things and find joy in serving students together, and also just being very, very aware of the extra stress that is on our families and our students right now. The challenges of lack of work and lack of access to healthcare, lack of testing opportunities for some of our families, especially undocumented families who may fear being tested, and all of the challenges that come in navigating this COVID world. So let us not forget that there is real stress out there, but let us hope that we can find joy together and keep our focus on our students, because they always bring the joy.
Thank you, Superintendent Sipe. Thank you. Director Skurlock.
Hey everyone, it's so good to see all of you. And it's always great to hear your comments. Mahina, thank you so much for keeping it real, for just sharing your experiences so that we never forget the importance of standing with our children and standing with our loved ones and making sure that we lift up those who are oppressed. And I want to thank you for taking your experiences and making it into something beautiful. It takes courage to do that. And I'm truly honored just to hear your story. And you can probably tell I'm cheering for you. You too, Yosaline. Amazing young women. Keep up the great work. As I thought about what Chair Howard had asked us to do about the seasons and what they mean to you, I was thinking about autumn and thinking about harvest season. But harvest season depends on what has been sown during the planting season. And I started to think about what's happening in our nation as far as reaping and sowing, what's happening across our nation. And a part of me is excited about some of the things that have been changing, especially around voter suppression, which has been an issue for many, many, many decades across our nation. But it also concerned me about the reaping and sowing around institutional racism, around systemic racism, and the impact of that, and whose voices are heard and whose voices are not heard, especially with the increase in hate crimes across our nation. And so I think about those things, reaping and sowing. What we're seeing as far as fruition of what we're seeing is not by accident, because that has been sown into our nation as far as conversations, things either being addressed or not being addressed. And in this case of what we're seeing now is oftentimes things that are being ignored, including the seriousness, the urgency of COVID-19. On Friday morning, last Friday, I woke up to 2 text messages, and one of my dearest friends, Johanna Mann's father, died from COVID-19. On the same day, one of my dearest friends, Imelda Cortez, one of her best friends from childhood, who worked with her and her family in their small business, died from COVID-19. And then we've had, as I've shared before, family members who have died from COVID-19 or have been impacted by COVID-19. And I think about again, what was brought up by Chair Howard around reaping and sowing. And some people have taken it seriously and have recognized, hey, we need to work together to combat this. And some people have ignored it. And so we're seeing now with the high numbers, as mentioned by Jerry Colonna, 250,000 people are gone. And I truly believe that if we continue to ignore the needs of others, that this type of cycle, this systemic cycle of paying attention to some and not paying attention to others, uplifting some and not uplifting others, I believe that that will continue if we don't address it head on. We have to be honest and courageous in our conversations to say, if people are negatively impacted by things, that we need to stand together as a unit and address those things. Healthcare, how we handle schooling, how we handle those who are elderly, how we deal with systemic racism within our systems. And so those are some things that I was thinking about, the reaping and the sowing. Harvest time is here. And now we're seeing some products of what we have sown and now what we are reaping. And I hope that we learn together so that when we sow in the future, that we expect great things because we have sown the right things. I was thinking about, and I so appreciate the letters that have been submitted from people across our state. I can understand the urgency around kids wanting to be back in the classroom, parents wanting to have their kiddos back in the classroom. I also understand the urgency of teachers who have medical issues where their doctors have said to them, or professionals have said to them, if you return back to the classroom, you are at a great high risk of not only contracting the virus, but potentially dying from the virus. These are real conversations, and it is challenging and it's painful. And there's no person that I've met as far as having conversations with my amazing students or with family members or with community members or with parents that want to see people die. especially now that the vaccine is making great progress. We're seeing great numbers as far as the success rate from the vaccine. And so there's a sense of excitement, a sense of, oh, if we just hold on, we can get through this. If we just hold on, there are people that may not have to die, or family members who may not have to deal with the death of the loved one, similar to what's happened with my friend Johanna and now my friend Imelda. So I'm thinking about all of those things. I'm also thinking about some of the things that came up in the letters around integrity, around students who are not feeling motivated, who are struggling. And then there's issues around cheating that have come up because of online learning and how easy it is to cheat and copy and then to submit things, and how important it is for all of our school districts across the state to have programs like Turnitin.com or anti-plagiarism programs, so that when students graduate from our institutions of study, that we have set them up on the right path to say plagiarism and cheating is not an option in college. You will be dismissed. And so if we can so anyway, those kind of conversations are coming up, and I appreciate those comments because it is something that is impacting me in my classroom. But on a positive note, I want to say how proud I am of my students, how proud I am of the parents, how proud I am of the educators that I have a pleasure to work with. I'm talking about the cream of the crop, brilliant, beautiful, courageous, aware, who really care deeply about students, who really care deeply about community. That's part of the reaping and the sowing, understanding the importance of loving your neighbor, understanding the importance of standing by your neighbor when it's hard, when it's challenging, and working together as a unit. That's what it's about. And some of the projects that students have submitted, some of the essays they've submitted, as I've shared before, we have kids who've tried to kill themselves. We've had family members who've tried to kill themselves. We have kids who deal with depression. We have family members that deal with depression. We have kids who are battling COVID and their family members are battling COVID. But we have resilient, amazing kids who are strong and courageous. And I tell you what, I'm so proud of them. I'm so proud of the families. I'm so proud of our communities that we are understanding, especially for such a time as this, the importance of loving one another and standing in the gap for one another so that we can walk together and make it through this season so that everyone can have a better future, a better tomorrow. So thank you for your time. I love all of you. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Scurlock. Thank you so much. Representative Helt.
I don't know how one follows that, Chair Howard. Oh, I have so many thoughts today. It has, you know, it's been a long 9 months. I think we're in our 9th month of COVID now. The thing that I'm thinking the most about is balance. Balance is incredibly hard to achieve in COVID. We're all struggling to find that balance, to find the balance that Jennifer Scurlock was speaking of, the balance between wearing a mask and protecting our neighbors and making sure that we're doing everything that we can to prevent the COVID spread, but yet helping our kids as much as we can with education. And finding that balance, I think, has been very hard for many families. I want to thank Student Representative Novoa for her words about the fact that balance isn't just something that we struggle to find inside of COVID. Balance is something that a lot of families struggle with on holidays. You know, so many times we look at holidays as, you know, hopeful and exciting, and we're so excited that we're here, but that's not always the reality for every family or every person. And so that balance is really, really hard. And I think that we have to remember that balance, especially through the holidays in the fall. I'm hearing a lot of families struggling more with finding the balance. I'm hearing, you know, as this goes on longer and longer, and we do our part to make sure that we're keeping COVID down and really working together. And I just want to say, in my community, I'm so proud of my community. Everywhere I go, I see people with a mask. Everywhere I go, I see people step aside on the trail, even outside, just to make sure that they're not encroaching in someone's space and trying to prevent the spread, so that we make sure that we can all get back to normal as soon as we can. But that balance is difficult, right? Families, the crisis hotlines, I'm hearing from the crisis hotlines that their calls are higher than they've ever been, and the call volume they're experiencing is difficult, and that is real. And how do we reach out and help people when we're trying to stay socially distanced, right? And really not being able to give people a hug is difficult. Not being able to see all of you in person and eat in that small conference room is difficult. I don't know that I ever thought that I would say I miss the small conference room that we stuff ourselves into for lunch, but I do. I miss being with people, and other people miss being with people, and I think it's getting hard. I'm getting more and more families concerned about their kids failing. This week I had a bunch of families reach out to me and say their kids are getting all Fs and their kid has never had an F in their life, that they're struggling really hard. I think teachers are also struggling really hard with distance learning. It's very difficult because they're watching their students struggle more with this distance learning, and it's harder to be able to help them because our teachers are so great at helping everybody and making sure that they are getting what they need, and it's becoming more and more difficult. So I'm thinking a lot about our homeless students that are not able to be inside of our schools and don't have homes. That's really weighing heavy on me as it's getting colder in Bend, and with fall comes cold, right? And so our warming shelter, we had a gentleman pass away due to cold and not having a place to be. So as a community, we stepped up and put in place a warming shelter within 28 hours to make sure that that doesn't happen again. But finding that balance, I think, is really, really hard. And I thank everyone on this call for thinking about the balance and finding the balance for our students and our kids, because I know that we're all struggling with it. I do want to read a paragraph quickly from NPR's article this week on schools and how European countries have been handling the increased spike in cases of COVID and schools. And I just wanted to read this really quick, just for thought and to remember to just, as we go through COVID, I think the hardest thing is we're learning every day as we move through it. There is no knowledge or science that isn't coming at us at the moment. The most current knowledge and science we have is always right at this moment. And that makes it hard to deal with. But the article from NPR says, across Europe, schools and childcare centers are staying open even as much of the continent reports rising coronavirus cases. And even as many businesses and gathering places are shut or restricted, countries such as France, United Kingdom, Germany, and Italy appear to be following the emerging evidence that schools have not been major centers of transmission of the virus, especially for young children. And experts say these nations are also demonstrating a commitment to avoiding the worst impacts on the pandemic on our children. So I think that we have to keep striving for that balance, and we have to keep trying to find that intersection of where safety and schooling align. And so I know that that is the toughest order of business, because we do want to honor COVID and we do not want to lose anyone to it, that we don't want to lose anyone to COVID. And so finding that safety and intersection of school, I think, is important. And I hope we keep striving towards that. So thank you. Thanks for the time, Chair Howard.
Director Russell.
Thank you, Chair Howard.
And thank you, Representative Helt. I did hear that from a distance. I had a warm situation. Thank you so much.
So I wanted to start by echoing what Jerry and others have said about the letters. I do appreciate getting the letters and hearing the viewpoints of so many people who may have perspectives that are different from mine on these issues. But I do appreciate very much them taking the time and effort to share their thoughts and their perspectives. And I agree with Jerry that it's important they know that we're all reading those and hearing what they have to say. And like Jerry, I do hope that they are acknowledged that those letters have been received and that we are and do appreciate them taking the time to do that. Second, I just wanted to mention that I did have the opportunity last night, along with 47 other people, to participate in a statewide meeting via Zoom of the Oregon Alliance of Black School Educators, and was pleased to see the number of people that were able to participate. OABC is primarily, and has been for some time, a Portland-based organization, but they are interested, again, in trying to widen their reach and reach into some of the other communities and encourage more Black educators and school board members and so forth to participate with the Alliance of Black School Educators. They did mention last night that they got a significant grant from the Oregon Community Foundation to work with school districts and educators on increasing the diversity of educators throughout the state, and particularly in the Portland area, but also in working with the African American Black Student Support Grant and Plan to help improve outcomes for African American and Black students. So appreciated that opportunity. In terms of the autumn and fall, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Usually at this time of year, when it becomes autumn and fall, I'm looking forward to spending time in Autzen Stadium watching the Ducks play. And that's obviously not happening. Also in anticipation of basketball season. I happen to be a big women's basketball fan, and was very disappointed when they didn't get a chance to play in the NC2A this past year, and was looking forward to a great season this year, which brings me to particularly what's happening in our schools, and my empathy for our students in particular and what they're going through, elementary through high school. But because I have a high school age granddaughter who is attending Sheldon High School here in Eugene this year, and who, absent COVID, would be playing basketball right now at Sheldon High School and getting ready for track season. She often has to come over here to use our Wi-Fi, because at home they've got their mother and two brothers all trying to work off of the Wi-Fi at one time, and it's not necessarily the best Wi-Fi, so that she oftentimes has to come over here during the day to work on her school assignments and do homework and so forth. But it really is kind of unfortunate, and I struggle to see some of the issues that she's starting to face. She's a good student, but she also, as a sophomore at Sheldon, set the record for the 400 meters for Sheldon High School, and has been being looked at by college coaches. But because she wasn't able to have a junior track season at the end of the spring, and because it doesn't look like they're going to have a senior season, she's going to probably miss out on some opportunities as a result of that. She has had some offers from some smaller schools that have had the ability to go based on her records and PR that she set as a sophomore, but she's struggling a bit with what she thinks could have been. And I know that other students are doing as well. so as well. So that's an issue for me, in particular as we move forward and think about the impacts of COVID and what it means both academically and overall extracurricularly and in social lives of our students. So I do empathize with some of the letters and sentiments that are being expressed, because it does hit home for many of us who are on this board as well. So thank you, Chair Howard.
Thank you, Director Russell. Thank you. Let's go ahead and hear from Second Vice Chair Wheeler.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Good morning, Daisla, Jala, greetings, friends. That is, Daisla is hello in Milik, and Jala is welcome in Athabascan. I want to start out with saying Happy National Native American Heritage Month. And I did some research over the weekend, just looking into the history of the proclamations, and it just really resonated with me that the intention of the National Proclamation's intention has always been to encourage others to look around them, to look at the landscape, to look at the people, and learn about the first people that inhabited this land and the first people that are still here today. And to notice that many of today's roads are built on Indian trails, and that many of our today's special gathering and recreational places were the same place that were special gathering and recreational places prior to contact. And that the native plants used for food and medicine were taught to those of us that use those things today. And that when towns were established and given names, that there were village sites that were there first. Because a good place to live has always been a good place to live. It's important to learn and teach yourself about the intersections of local history and how it's shaped our communities today. We must all try to be not just the best stewards of the land, but the stewards of the stories and the people too. This month, many people will be honoring and practicing a tradition that in both pre-contact and contemporary culture, some call Thanksgiving and some of us call potlatch. Potlatch is one of the guiding values of many Native American groups, and it was one of the highest regarded and practiced traditions by my tribe, the Coquille tribe. Potlatch is a tradition of generosity and sharing with others. Potlatch is a tradition and redistribution of wealth in the form of gift giving. And it's meant as a way to share with neighbors and provides an opportunity to share about history, traditions, and cultural aspects. It's through the potlatch that many teachings have been passed down to generations and will continue to promote the generational passage of family stories, practices, and traditions. On November 26th, my family, like others, will be redefining how we potlatch this year, how we greet our neighbors and our family, how we share, and how we redistribute our wealth and resources to others during these unprecedented times. And I want to finish with a statement by our chief, Chief Ivy. He says, "We want a house with a crowded table and a place by the fire for everyone." So that is my statement, my homework assignment that I wrote a number of times. I probably wrote 12 or 13 white papers on it, but that's what I settled with this morning. So thank you.
Vice Chair Wheeler, thank you. Vice Chair Martinez Zapata.
Okay, I don't think I was ready, Kimberly. Thank you. Thank you for everyone. One of the things that I'm grateful for when I get the opportunity to not be first is to listen to everybody's reflections, because it sure does provide some significant perspective for me. I want to talk about the meaning of fall, and more than anything, I think the season of the holidays that are upcoming. To me, this season begins the season of dar gracias, giving thanks. I remember as a child, the first memories that I have or notions that I have of Thanksgiving were the concept that my mom made of it, which was really more of a spiritual or religious concept of giving thanks for our lives, for everything that we were able to have and enjoy. it also was significant for us that it was the beginning of the time or the advent of being able to see our family, my mother's family in Mexico. Usually we traveled to Mexico in December to see her family and spend time with them. So it was just such a beautiful time. It represented a beautiful time, and have very fond memories of this change of season for me. I want to echo Jerry's gratitude to the people of Oregon for their support of education by passing school bonds. In a time like this, to see that, I just can't tell you how heartfelt the gratitude that I have is. So thank you very much. It speaks very much to what we believe in, the faith that we have in education and in our kids, our children. I also, and this is my official thanks, I'm hearing that we want to make sure that people know that they are being heard. So this is my official thank you to every parent, to every grandparent, to every teacher, and to every general citizen who took the time to send us public comments. Reading the public comments this month has been one of the most difficult things I've had to do in recent history, I think. I'd like to share some of my thoughts and mulling with this regard. One of the trends that I find particularly distressing in much of what I'm hearing from parents regarding their children's participation in school during comprehensive distance learning is that the children are unwilling to participate, or that they are losing interest and motivation. As an educator, I constantly strive to make my classroom one where students will want to run to versus just feel like they have to be there. It's much easier said than done. And that is my eternal goal. For me, this starts by emulating and teaching my students the significance of learning, not for its extrinsic value alone, but for the love and wealth of learning itself. It pains me to hear that students' engagement is waning, in part because they cannot thrive unless it's in a school setting, or because they don't have teachers policing their performance, or because they don't get to participate in that AP class so they can then become more competitive than other students in their environment. Competition is healthy. Healthy competition is healthy. If what students are learning, if what we are teaching students is that 4.5 GPA is more consequential than their personal growth, then I think we are teaching kids a losing ideology. I'm reminded of the many children who have historically lived in the shadows and social isolation, who have to battle with the PTSD and the emotional deterioration that racial battle fatigue causes, who have been tracked out of high achieving classes. They are figuratively and often literally forced to compete while practicing on a field full of holes and molehills, and incredibly, many are able to make it. Not enough, though the remarks I've read over and over again on the loss of opportunity for traditional students begs the question of why and how students of color continue to be systemically edged out. I also appreciate the letters and comments that we get to ask us to consider all of the cautions before we unleash an even more uncontrollable pandemic on our communities. And I appreciate the success stories as well. I want to continue sharing with you one of those pandemic success stories in education. One of the educators whom I hold in highest regard because of her dedication and efficacy has consistently been reporting to me that her second grade students continue to have near 100% participation rate since the start of the school year. I mentioned she reported to as much 3 or 4 weeks into the school year at our last board meeting. If you'll recall, these are English language learners from some unparalleled economically challenging circumstances. The statistics have not changed. So I wondered and asked, okay, but how are the students performing? Surely, I thought, they might be engaged because their parents are making them show their faces. I know my mom would have. But maybe they're not doing so well. Performance? Their performance is the best part, she exclaimed. They are doing outstanding. This is a very finite segment of the population. It is statistically an insignificant subset. And still, I have to wonder why these children? Why so well? Where is their tenacity and resilience coming from? And I'm sharing these thoughts with you because I would like for you to also consider those questions. My position in our society and life as a woman of color has taught me compassion and empathy. If anything, that's one of the greatest lessons. Reading of the difficulties that students are experiencing, no doubt, makes me want to do the impossible to advocate for the children mentioned in every statement we received. I told myself I wasn't going to cry today. For our children in Oregon, they're my children too, in my role. Many of the comments that we received center the immunity of children from significant COVID impact. The data may suggest this is a valid trend and argument. And I say this cautiously because I'm certainly not the expert, but I am an avid listener and learner. And so I rely on all of the appeals we receive from experts and personal experience. The glaring fallacy in this notion that centers children's immunity, low risk or impact by COVID-19 is that children live in isolation. They do not. As education leaders, we are called to advise others in making the most reasonable, responsible decisions and choices that means considering the whole of the long-term impact on these children that we are tasked with teaching and championing. The whole of that impact, in my opinion, is the health of our entire community. That balance that Representative Helt mentioned. I would be appalled and might be the first to ring the tallest, most resounding bell if what I was seeing in our state was stagnation in response to the well-being of our kids. This is not the case. I know that, like myself, many key players, policymakers, stakeholders, advisors, and everyone concerned, including yourselves as parents, those of you who wrote in, we are all diligently working toward a rapid, tenable, and above all, equitable solution for everyone, including the children of Oregon. And just like you, I'm eager and looking forward to the day when we have to, the greatest thing that we have to worry about is the hustle and bustle of schools and whether my kid is going to make it to his first class on time, and rather than to have to learn that my nephew, who'd finally made his dream of competing in the NCAA wrestling tournament championship, he finally made that dream come true and had to accept that it wouldn't be a reality last spring. So thank you so much for writing in, for giving us your thoughts, your advice. I want to assure you that we are listening, that we are considering what you're saying, what you're telling us, as Jerry and George specifically mentioned. Even if we're not always in agreement with what we hear, we listen. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Chair Howard.
Thank you, Vice Chair Martinez Zapata. Before I give my director's chair report, Director Veliz, is there anything you would like to add, or are you good?
I'll just say, somebody mentioned Rhode Island, and I went to graduate school in Rhode Island, and the fall is, if you've ever been in New England, is beautiful. It's amazing. Of course, Oregon's beautiful, but there's New England and Rhode Island, Connecticut, and all those is, if you haven't seen that, it is just picturesque. And so that's what I would just say. I think, and it's a beautiful time. So I think that's what I would say about the fall. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Director Belize. I think Student Representative Arenas, you did share, correct? Or did I skip you on accident?
I did. Thank you.
Okay, I thought so. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you. So 250,000 dead from COVID is a very sobering number. When I was thinking about the assignment that I gave last month, it was partly because I realized that we were going to have our first board meeting in November that I remember. Since I've been on the board, we usually skip November. November is the month of Thanksgiving, this national holiday. And for my family and for my generations of Howards and Stewarts that have lived and worked, and toiled in this country, Thanksgiving is a complicated holiday. And yet, 3 times in our nation's history, a president has used the opportunity that this last Thursday in November to attempt to bring us together as Americans, as a country, as people who live here and work here together, and think about the word union. George Washington, our first president, designated November 26th, which this year happens to be the day of Thanksgiving, as a national day of thanks. Again, after the Civil War, Lincoln, and probably the most important president for my people, even though he also was a very complicated human being. I don't think he necessarily wanted to free the slaves because he wanted to free the slaves and because he loved Black people, but he needed to do it to bring this country back together. He used the words fit and proper and one heart and one voice and whole American people. And he talked about healing the wounds of a nation and restoring a nation after a terrible war that divided us and many, many people died. And then President Roosevelt, 1941, made it a national holiday. In the midst of World War II, after a decade of the biggest depression that we had known until 2007 as a nation, again, the division that comes with that kind of tragedy to a country. And here we are again, as a country, divided, hugely divided, and dealing with a pandemic that is global and huge and affects every single one of us in one way, shape, or form or another. And like all of those other times that I mentioned, there are members of our community that are disproportionately affected by those tragedies, those wars, those depressions, the pandemic. And yet, it is very easy for us to silo ourselves with our families and our units and forget the collective that makes this country great. So when I think about Thanksgiving, I recognize that there are the first people and the potlatch that we owe our Thanksgivings to. That's what we co-opted, we borrowed, we took over, and we did not give recognition to. It's So I'm so glad that Second Vice Chair Wheeler gave recognition to the fact that us gathering around a turkey with all of our friends and family and sharing food and generosity is really because our first people, the first people of this land did so. And then we said, how can we use this gathering to continue to remind us that we are one nation? And yet we continue to forget that that nation is not always, the systems, the policies, the laws have not always and continue to not take into consideration every single individual that makes up that nation. So this Thanksgiving, I feel like we have this opportunity to really do give Thanksgiving for the lives that are still, that we still have, to honor those that we have lost, to think about the collective energy it will take for us to move through this pandemic. And as those of us who are focused on our young people and our students and our children and having them be back at school, the work that it takes as a community, as many of you have already mentioned, to wear our masks, to wash our hands for 20 seconds. And Kenton will tell you, it's being a leader. You are a leader if you do those things. And if we all do those things and stay home unless absolutely necessary, our kids will go back to school. That's what we need to do. And it is hard. It's hard because masks are hard to wear, right? And it is hard because nobody likes to wash their hands. If you've seen the Bergman song that has been hitting, has gone viral, she talks about hand lotion. I hope you found some hand lotion that really brings you comfort. I hope that you have hand lotion because washing your hands for 20 seconds is both tiring and hard on your hands, but it is so important for us to do. And if you can stay home and only go to the grocery store every 14 days, if at all, do it. If you could leave a roll of toilet paper on the shelf for somebody else because you don't really need that much toilet paper, then do it. If you don't need to go to the restaurant, have it ordered in. Yes, support our economy. Order the food, but don't go sit in the restaurant. Don't sit in the bar. Don't gather together for Thanksgiving outside of your family if you don't have to. And then our children will get to go back to school. And just like the revolution and the words of our founding fathers, that even though they did not include very many of us around this table, they did offer a broad enough scope and vision that we can be here today in 2020 and have our leadership look the way that it looks on behalf of our students. And for Lincoln, after the Civil War, for reminding us that we are a union. And for Roosevelt, in the midst of the Great War, after the Great Depression, reminding us that we are a union. And today, all of you and all of your words reminding us that it is a collective and it is a community. This is the time of Thanksgiving, of generosity, the time of potlatch, the season that can be hard and challenging for many among us. We are in it together. And for anyone who doubts that, in the last hour, I have seen a worm. I have had a child go outside with one boot on and then come back and track mud through the house. Yesterday, there were blackberries smashed into the carpet and the dog pooped on the sofa. And my boys stole bricks. Maybe I should say they borrowed bricks from the neighbor's yard in order to make a Titanic in their rock pit. So we had to take time to talk about how the bricks did not belong to them and then return each of the bricks to the neighbor's yard. This is the reality that we are all living with in one shape or form or another. Our teachers that are also mothers are living this. Our corporate leaders who are also fathers are living this. Any of us that have any children that we are neighbors to, or aunties and uncles to, or grandparents to, are living with this. And I hope that you get your Blackberry stains out of your carpet and the poop off your sofa. I hope that your neighbors are understanding that their bricks are not exactly put back the way that they wanted them to be. And that we all wear our masks, we all wash our hands for 20 seconds, we all stay home unless absolute necessary, and then our children can go back to school. Thank you all for your leadership, and happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your potlatch celebrations with your unit, just your unit, nobody else. And be on Zoom if you can to talk to the people you can't see and hug. And enjoy the season of rebirth as we all nestle in for the winter, because in the spring, we get to go outside and the blossoms will grow and there will be a vaccine and we will come out the other end of this together as a union. Director Gill, you ready to give your report?
Yes. Chair Howard, I do think we should consider building several minutes into the agenda after the board reports for people to take just a minute and breathe and reflect. So I'm being really honest about that. So I hope that we can do that in the future. There is a lot of wisdom, compassion, perspective, and direction offered through these board reports. And it's not something that has always been experienced. And it's broadly both anticipated and appreciated, I know, by the staff of the department and several education leaders that I know of now. You bring some leadership and purpose, and it's just highly valued. So I just appreciate what you all share at the beginning of each meeting. I think my report is often kind of an abrupt shift to here's what implementation looks like right now. And while that's also needed and necessary, it just feels like it would be good to build in a little time in the future for people to take a moment with the words that you all have shared.
Thank you, Director Gill. That's a great reflection back. Thank you.
Thanks. So I will jump right in. I'll share also that the question that Director Colonna and Director Russell came forward with about the letters that we receive, and almost everybody commented on having read through those. I also read through every email that is sent to me. I do want people to know that doesn't always happen on the same day they send it. So I often spend several hours on the weekend reading several hundred emails to catch up through those. But I do read all of them. We do have responses that go to the individuals who write emails to us. We have some different processes for that, and those have evolved over time. There are some email responses that include some same information. They're tailored to a degree based on what is included in what the original author has written to us. They come out from different people. So some are from me, some are from Lisa on behalf of the board, recognizing what they sent and providing some information back. Like Superintendent Sipe, I respond directly initially to many of them, but I also am not able to keep up with a back and forth with folks over a long period of time. So sometimes those come to an end, and there are some folks who write to me specifically and to several others several times a week, and they don't all receive a response for every one of those, but there are processes in place. So I just wanted to make that clear for folks, and also share the appreciation for both what people are sharing, what they're going through, the ideas that they bring forward, and that those do influence the process as we go forward and continue to think about both how to best support schools and teachers and educators in delivering instruction right now, and also in that large question of whether it should be happening in person or needs to continue to happen over a distance. And so those are reviewed not only by the Department of Education, but by the partners who also help make that decision, which leads me to this other statement. I just want to be clear for folks that are listening that the State Board of Education today, and really on any time they meet, are not making a decision in that moment about whether school will be happening in person or from a distance, or whether there's a change in the metrics that helps districts make those decisions. That is really a multi-agency effort that includes the Department of Education, but also through deep partnership with the Oregon Health Authority and many partners who include epidemiologists and pediatricians and public health experts, which is not the knowledge and skill set that the department has, are deeply involved in those decisions, as is the Department of Justice and OSHA, and clearly the governor's office. So just want to be clear that while we'll continue to talk about these things here and your input to the state board is valued, that you won't see a decision made in a meeting, because it involves many organizations, many agencies and partners. And then quickly to sort of shift over to talk about autumn. So I appreciate that you brought that into the space. And when you introduced the idea this morning, you talked about, Chair Howard, the trees changing, and it made me think, I need to get outside. I spend way too many hours in front of what I've set up in my home and in the office at work when I go back and forth, multiple screens, and I have not stepped out to see much of that change. So I need to do that. And I agree with Treasurer Reed that being an educator for more than 30 years now in Oregon and going to school before that, just sort of that nervous tension of the beginning of the school year is a big part of my thinking about autumn and what it brings. With that, I do have several things to share with you. One of them, sorry, I'm getting a few other things ready here on the screen. One of them is just a beginning quote from Fred Rogers, really, that also I think speaks to autumn. And it is that often when you think that you're at the end of something, you're at the beginning of something else. So while summer has come to an end and we see this change, we're heading into winter and something new. And in this time and this fall and coming winter, one thing I know is that we all need to be open to constant change and ready to respond to new information, because as another director pointed out to us, it's coming at us daily. New information in sort of a barrage of learning about COVID-19 and what may help us all move through this with the best hope of keeping everyone safe. So there's just nothing in our current situation that allows for sameness or static solutions in my mind. So again, that's another call out to the letters we receive. Your ideas are helpful and help us think through steps we can take. I have several items to share with you all today. So I'm going to touch on the State Board of Education priorities a little bit, talk about a project we've been working on at the department with many community partners around equity terminology and how we refer to some of our equity and diversity topics and talk about them in an asset-based way. do some clarification around the 2020-21 assessment systems that will be in place and that may not be in place. You all noted that we received a letter from some legislators regarding some action of the department and the state board around that. So I just want to be really clear about exactly what's happening so there isn't confusion around that. And then I will touch on, since we last met, we did release new metrics for returning to in-person instruction and other updates related to COVID-19 and schools. So I want to make sure you have that information and how it relates to the current 2-week freeze that we're in under Governor Brown's leadership. And also the complaint process for folks that are concerned that a school may not be following any of these directives precisely, and how that works. And then if there's time, I'll address questions, but I think we may be tight on time. So I'm also open to any individual conversations as board members want to reach out. So first, State Board of Education priorities. So that's back to this page. And I'm going to be focusing in on that far right column, the strategic initiatives for 2021. And I just want to give a very short highlight around where I think we're at with each of these. So on the effort around prohibition of hate symbols in our schools and responding to bias incidents, there is a lot happening. So we have a website. I hope that you've gone to see it recently. It continues to grow with additional tools and resources in multiple languages for our educators, our students, and our families. There are trainings in here for our educators that our team has put together under the leadership of Deputy Director Carmen Xiomara Urbina. We are also continuing to work on efforts to reach out to communities across the state of Oregon to inform your work going forward around a permanent rule. This includes a lot of nuanced conversations with specific communities. We received some letters regarding the difference between the sort of usurping of the swastika symbol by the Nazi Party, and how that use became an anti-Semitic sort of a statement, and other swastikas that also exist and predate that use of the swastika, that have entirely different meanings for our Eastern Indian members of our community and for some Native American tribes here in the United States. So we'll continue to work through all of those conversations and bring those ideas into the permanent rule decision-making process for you all. We continue to have really good partners on the educator side with COSA and the Oregon School Boards Association, providing both resources and time with educators to help us share the information. So I feel like this is on a good track, and we're continuing to move down that road. The idea of equity committees being formed in school districts to inform local school board action, that is also moving forward. So your meeting today, you'll be establishing a local school board advisor position to the State Board of Education to help us think through some of these issues. We have shared this initiative with key partners at the Oregon School Boards Association, the Coalition of Oregon School Administrators, some legislators who are happy to partner with us around legislation. Senator Denbrough, who is the chair of the Education Committee, chief among those. He also is interested in other ideas that we discussed around the diversification of budget committees that we talked about at our board retreat. So I think we have a strong partner in the legislature to work through these. Senator Denbrough and Representative Alonzo Leon, who's the chair in the House Education Committee, actually would like to come visit with the board at an upcoming meeting in December or January and talk about these shared priorities that they hold and that the state board holds. So I think that in both of those areas, we'll see some legislation possibly moving forward. Representative McCowan, or McEwen, excuse me, is also bringing forward legislation that mirrors the state board policy on hate symbols in our schools to the legislature. And I think that she'll be able to introduce that in the House Education Committee during the December special session. That's what we're hoping for. So we'll continue to watch that move forward as well. On your assessment priority, this one, I feel like we need to work closely between the staff and the state board so that we're tightly focusing in on the topics that the state board is interested in. You know, we've been working around the assessment efforts for a few years now, and we do have, we've had some work sessions, we've had many presentations, and I think that those have been helpful and effective. And then we circle back to still wanting to talk about assessment in different ways. This one's very much focused on trying to overcome racism and bias that is involved in statewide assessment systems. And I think that what I'd like to see us do going forward is develop, and Chair Howard and I have talked about this too, and I think Chair Howard supportive of this, but to develop a board subcommittee that would work directly with some staff at the department to co-design an agenda for this effort, a work plan, some reports that would go to the state board, dockets for the entire state board to consider, and possible work sessions on that topic so that we're in close alignment there. And then the final strategic plan or strategic initiative is on this bilingual education effort. And this one I think needs that same kind of attention where we have some board members who step into a subcommittee to work with ODE staff, and likely because of the topic and the need for some expertise and understanding what's happening in other countries and other states, I think that we would also bring in some outside research partners to support this effort. So I'd like us in the future to think about folks that would want to serve on a board subcommittee, and you would connect with Chair Howard and we could work through a process for that, but both on the assessment topic and on the bilingual education topic. And the bilingual education topic, I think we need to identify the benefits of it, review what's happening here in this country around that effort, and international models, which are much more prevalent than models in the United States. Identify barriers and pathways in Oregon, including where the State Board of Education has authority and local impacts of mandates like that, but in alignment with where we can also partner with others, which leads to the information that the governor's office and the governor herself and the Racial Justice Council are all very interested in this topic as well. So I think that Chair Howard and I will be engaging with the governor's office at their request, along with some other state agencies and their rulemaking bodies, boards, to talk about some of the efforts underway across state agencies and state boards and commissions and councils, and look for some synergy and possible connections with the Racial Justice Council on this work. So, and that's where that's at. I'm going to jump into the equity terminology and just say that this aligns with sort of an evolution around equity that the Department of Education has been going through the last 3 years. And I'm speaking to those 3 years because they're my time with the department. Was focused and centered around the Oregon education sector's equity lens. So that first was born out of the Oregon Education Investment Board, OEIB, excuse me. And that equity lens was adopted by the other education sector agencies, HEC and ODE and the Early Learning Division and Youth Development Division and the Quality Education Commission and others. And since that time, we moved forward to say, using an equity lens is important. It's also critically important for the department to have an education equity stance. And so we got very clear about what that means to us in terms of how we review directives that come our way from the legislature or the governor and apply an equity stance to those, and how we distribute funds, and how we look to dismantle current systems that that continue a history of oppression and separating those who have and those who don't. And then now where we are evolving to is much deeper set of processes to ensure that everyone in the agency is working around an equity strategic plan. So we said the other strategic plan we have isn't reaching the kind of change that we're looking for. So we're now moving towards a plan that centers around equity, racial equity, and anti-racist practices, that causes us to use equity decision tools in decision-making processes within the agency, and ties into the state board's effort to have an equity impact analysis with dockets that come in front of you. So we'll talk more and more about what all is included in that plan in the future. But I just want to say that that evolution has led to another effort as we become what Dr. Garcia would say is in better or in a right relationship with our communities, that the way we even speak about equity, the terminology that we use has needed to evolve and change. And so I want to recognize that this effort has also had a long evolution. So back when there was a chief education office in Oregon, Dr. Shandine Garcia, who is our senior strategy and operations officer, worked at the chief education office for a time and began an effort to center asset-based language and recognition in the equity terminology that's used in our education sector. That had evolved over time. And then as I came into the department and Deputy Director Carmen Ciamara Urbina joined me at the department, we undertook an effort to move us to a higher level of discourse around equity and a deeper understanding. So we developed some tools to help people think about the language that they use. And now, under the leadership of Scott Nine, who's our Assistant Superintendent at the Office of Education, Innovation, and Improvement, and Emil Sau, who is the relational strategist for that office, have taken that to another level, partly through the efforts that we have developed with the Standing Rules Advisory Committee that is much more representative of Oregon's student body, to have the communities of Oregon help us determine the terminology that we should be using. So we're going to hear a report on that at the December meeting that kind of talks about the process that we've gone through. And then hopefully at the January and February meeting, we'll be bringing, here's the way we're going to be talking about equity as we partnered with our communities in Oregon. This effort is really about recognizing our need to change what has been, to overcome bias that is in the words that we use, the deficit-based language that is used, the way that institutional racism is centered in the development of Oregon Administrative Rule and really Oregon Revised Statute, and to better center diversity and equity and the people that these systems are really designed to serve. The process will show that we've been engaging community that really reflects the demographics of the students that are in our schools today. We're holding a parallel process to this in partnership with the 9 sovereign nations here in the state that is really kind of looking at the terminology, both in terms of racial equity, but also in terms of that sovereignty that exists and understanding, developing a stronger understanding of the sovereignty of the 9 tribes and the citizens of those tribes. And then some processes that will hopefully help us sustain this effort over time, because a one-time picture of equity language we know will only be as good as that month as language evolves around us. So we need to be able to adjust and change and have ways of identifying changes in language and understanding the meaning of new terms and words. Okay, now an assessment. Again, clarification and update just to be really clear about where we're at with assessment for this school year. So we have taken some action as an agency and as the state board. So first, we did suspend the kindergarten assessment for this year. That's an assessment that's typically taken early in the fall by all kindergarten students in Oregon. And we suspended that for a number of reasons. Ultimately, in this case, because across the state, most students were not actually in person in the fall, and this is an in-person assessment. Essential skills are a part of the Oregon diploma requirements. We suspended those last year, and we have taken action in a temporary rule and then what will become a permanent rule if you continue to vote for it, to suspend those for the class of 2021 as well. This is because the primary way that students demonstrate proficiency in the essential skills of reading, writing, and mathematics is through the statewide summative assessment. Students did not participate in that assessment last year, so that took away their primary way of demonstrating that proficiency. We have also had a first read on waiving the local performance assessments for students in grades 3 through 8 and in high school, typically grade 10, but one time in high school, students show proficiency on a number of local assessments in reading, writing, mathematics, sometimes science and speaking, and other areas as well. So this does not mean these wouldn't happen necessarily, but this is the department's effort to allow districts to focus on engagement and on instruction with students, and in the precious time that they have with them, not to have that focus on LPAs, local performance assessments. But some districts may continue to use those and may see those as an integral, which is when they work best, an integral part of their curriculum. So there will be a mix of districts that use these and districts that don't. This is the crux of the letter from 4 legislators that came our way. So there is a requirement for districts to make a nationally normed college entrance practice assessment available. We have waived that requirement for districts, and I'll share a little bit. Again, this is you had a first read, and you'll have a possible adoption of this in January or February. So there's still time to make a decision around this. We're seeking the board's support in this waiver because we think that we need to reduce burdens that are not crucial to instruction for our schools, our educators, or our students. And to provide a little bit of context around this, this has typically in Oregon been the PSAT, although some districts use the ACT and they have a waiver process or a way that they pay for that on their own. That's typically given in the fall, in October. We clearly didn't do that again because these are secure tests that are given in person and that was not available. The College Board, who operates the PSAT, has scheduled an additional testing date in January of 2021. I think it's still pretty unclear to us whether we will have the majority of our students in school in January. We need to see what post-holiday COVID rates look like and where we're at with vaccines and things like that. So I think that's another possibility, but not inevitable. A couple of other things about this is that districts can individually have waivers and students and families can individually seek waivers, but we wanted to reduce that burden on districts and educators at this time because we anticipate that nearly everyone would be waiving this opportunity. And so to have all the 10th graders in Oregon individually waive and have processes for this was it felt like a more reasonable approach to that effort. The purpose for this assessment, according to the statute, is to predict the success of students on and provide practice for students taking college entrance exams. And I think that's important to think about because it relates to a perceived benefit of having Oregon students take a practice college entrance examination because they're predictive of future college performance on those examinations. And we found that in practice, our students of color in Oregon are underrepresented and white students and Asian students are overrepresented in this participation in this assessment. The fact is that our Black, Latino, Latina, Latinx students, Native American students don't participate in the PSAT at representative demographic rates. Local and national trends in college admissions are also beginning to recognize this, and they're removing this examination from their admissions processes. This has happened here in Oregon. This is happening in process in California. About 2/3 of colleges now do not use or are blind to testing in their admission process. They're looking to other indicators of future success that are more valid and reliable, like grade point average, writing samples, interviews, teacher recommendations. All those things are carrying greater weight in most admission practices now. I think with some of this information and looking to even the court's action in California, naming the ACT and SAT as part of the college admissions process as really blatantly racist is something that we maybe as a board should equally consider whether this is an assessment that should be reinstituted and something that we should be talking to the legislature about. That said, there are some—
Director Gill, would we have a moment for a couple of quick questions, or would prefer us to wait until you finish this section?
Yeah, let me just make 2 more points and then sure, we can pause and take questions. I think that there are some benefits for having students participate in nationally normed entrance exams. One of those is the National Merit Scholarship. However, that program asks for the test to be given in 11th grade, and Oregon's law requires it in 10th grade. So that one doesn't actually impact Oregon's version of offering this assessment. I think that the other benefit is largely outweighed, but that is that students are getting practice on these assessments. And again, because most college admissions are moving away from this model, I don't know that that's a valid reason any longer. Okay, sorry, Chair Howard.
Oh, no, thank you. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose the continuity. So first Director Colonna and then Director Ross.
Thank you very much, Chair Howard. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to make a comment on the nationally normed college entrance practice assessment, Director Gill. I have some mixed feelings on it, but that's not what I want to comment on. I want to comment on the fact that you got a letter from 4 legislators on November 17th. It would be a difficult letter to respond to because of the technical nature of it, and there's many sides to the issue. But I was really, really impressed with you as our leader by November 18th, sending back to them a really cogent, extremely well-written response with an answer to each question backed up by research and statistics. And I know in the situation that you're in, you have to be extremely careful, detailed, and so forth. But I was just really impressed with your response. And I do realize how hard that writing is. And I didn't want this to go by without thanking you for that really good hard work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Colonna. I do have to give credit. So we do have a team, and we have some amazing folks in our assessment team in the Office of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment, led by Dan Farley, the director there, who's presented to you all. And they have both thought through whether we should be seeking this waiver in the first place. So there was a lot of information that they had at hand, and then we're ready to respond. And so appreciate their effort in that response as well.
Thank you.
Director Russell?
Thank you, Chair Howard. Director Gill, I have a question specifically related to the language to make sure I understand it. On both the local performance assessment and the nationally normed exams, the proposal is that they be waived, that the requirements be waived. Does that mean, in fact, that districts don't have to do that, but if they choose to, they could?
So in the local, thanks, Director Russell, sorry. The local performance assessment, yes. So school districts could choose to continue with those. And like I said, some of them have them embedded in their curricula. So that will continue in some of our schools and districts, and others will choose to focus on engagement and instruction. The requirement on the nationally normed college entrance practice assessment. So some districts do pay for this themselves, and they may continue if they have an opportunity to bring students in to an in-person setting to participate in these assessments. This waiver would not require them to do that, and would not fund for those school districts that rely on the state to pay for it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gill. Thank you, Director Colonna. We have two more questions. We have one from Student Representative Novoa, and then one from Treasurer Reed. So let's start with Student Representative.
It's not really a question, and be more of a statement or a perspective I would like to offer. For the national normed college entrance practice assessments, I believe as a student, especially on the other side of the spectrum of being a Mexican and a Native American student, I feel like the more white students and Asian students are more pushed due to the fact that it's normal for them. A lot of students who are in first generation families, or that don't necessarily have people to turn to prep for ACT tests like that, they shy away from it due to the fact that they're scared of failure. And that's going to be more common in the more suppressed areas as far as those type of nationalities. So when it comes to those tests and possibly reopening them again, I know I'm fearful, for one, due to the fact that I'm a bad tester, and second, because I have no one to seek advice from, as far as being from 5 different nationalities who never strived to go to college. So with that being said, I strongly believe that those tests should stay the way it is right now and shouldn't be something that's mandatory to get into college, because I have no doubt that I have the ability to attend and to graduate from a great college. But the fact that these tests would probably be a barrier for me, only because I wasn't raised in a household or around people who found this as a normal thing to look forward to in high school and nobody to seek information or advice from.
Thank you,
Thank
student
you.
representative. Richard Gill, do you have anything to respond, or are you ready for the next?
I'm ready. I was just also going to thank Mahina. I think that what you shared is really true for many of our students today, and it's one of the reasons beyond the fact that these assessments are turning out not to be as predictive of college success as many of the other measures, that many colleges and universities are moving away from them. So they're discovering that they're narrowing the scope of students who could be successful in their programs. So I appreciate you sharing that.
I believe Treasurer Reed was next for the question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad that I get to ask this question after Ms. Novoa's comment, because it builds on that to a certain extent. I hear what she was saying well, and I hear what you were saying, Dr. Gill, about the increasing irrelevance, if that's the right word, of these specific tests. But I do wonder about the potential value of, in a sense, removing a barrier, imperfect though it is, or at least the intent of that, in saying we want everyone to have the ability or the prompt to potentially travel that path. That's not especially articulate on my part, but what I'm curious about is, if this requirement were suspended, has there been thought about what might replace it with that intent of helping people who don't have that tradition in their family, or people saying you should think about what comes after high school? Is there a more relevant, more effective thing that might succeed this requirement?
Yes, thank you for that question. So I think that there are a couple of pieces. So on the assessment side, I'll talk about one in just a minute. But I think that there has been a really strong effort between the Higher Ed Coordinating Commission and the Department of Education, in partnership with high school, college counselors, and career counselor folks and college advisors, that has come together the last 4 or 5 years to really be clear about helping students on that pathway to enter community college or university, and what is really needed in order to do that and be successful around it. So that has been a number of efforts around ensuring that more Oregon students participate in the FAFSA and Oregon FAFSA, and that all of OSAC's opportunities for paying for college are made clear to students, and that those processes, much like you talked about with single applications to college, is a common application to many scholarship opportunities that Oregon offers. Also access to programs like Aspire, and sorry, the other one, the name of it is escaping me.
The Oregon College Savings Plan. That's what you meant, right?
Yeah, that's the one I meant. Aspire, and anyway, there's another A one.
Yep.
That I'll get Avid. Thank you. Those programs I think are what's coming in place of asking students to take a one-time participation in a test to prepare for college, or these ongoing efforts to both fund, save for, and prepare students for success in the long term, sort of the perseverance and readiness for college.
That's helpful. And one last comment. I think it would be interesting to talk about whether there is something specific about that in the inventory that you just listed. Is there some required attend an orientation session, or that everyone learns about that in some specific way or something? I'm certainly not prepared to offer what that is, but what was appealing about this, recognizing everyone's comments here, is that everyone sees it or gets access to it or gets used to it or knows about it, that sort of thing. So I'll be quiet now, but I think that the intent here is we're all headed in the same direction, probably.
Yes, thank you, Treasurer Reed. So we have a question from Director Scurlock and one from Representative Halt. But before that, I wanted.
You muted, Chair Howard.
I don't know when I went off mute. I did want to note that we have Director Skurlock and Representative Halt with questions next. But before that, since the comments are not public, I did want to note that Student Representative Arenas shared that not only do students not have the culture of that test taking, but for many multilingual students, it requires more time to read the exams, which also heavily impacts their results on these timed tests. And she says, I am one of those bilingual students who have the intellect to pass it. However, due to the timing element, it heavily impacts performance. So I wanted to note that. And then Superintendent Sipe noted that College Possible is also a very helpful tool and has been helpful for her students as well in terms of the sort of college-bound support.
Yeah.
So let's hear from Director Skurlock and then from Representative Halt.
Thank you, Chair Howard, and thank you, Colt Gill, for the presentation. I just wanted to make a comment. I teach AP English Language and Composition, and so with the AP English or AP and IB and College Now courses that are offered for students, I found that some of my most amazing students are my students who need more time on the assessments. And it always breaks my heart, literally every single year when I've taught International Baccalaureate AP classes, where some of my brightest, amazing, most thoughtful, critical thinking students just didn't have enough time on the exams. And literally the time factor made the difference between them receiving college credit or a 5, 4, 3 on the exam. For AP or IB, it can be up to the 7 range, versus not passing the exam. I've seen it for years. This is my 18th year of teaching. So I wanted to put that out there. When my students, when I give them, for the AP exam, they have to finish 3 essays, a rhetorical analysis, an argument essay, and a synthesis essay, reading multiple sources. They have to complete 3 solid essays in 2 hours and 15 minutes. The time constraints are sharp. It's hard. And then on top of that, they have to complete about 52 to 55 questions, multiple choice section. So their whole exam is approximately 4 hours with a little break in between. And again, I see my most amazing, bright students who just need more time, not pass the assessments, and it's not based on their skills. It's not based on what they can do. They just needed more time. So I hope that as we make these decisions and we think about the bigger picture, I found that it has directly impacted my bilingual students, amazing processors, thinking deeply about content, but they just need more time. And so I hope that we can, again, keep that in mind as we are planning for these assessments and being able to push back to say, if we're going to require standardized assessments, students need more time. They are amazing students. So it's really not a fair representation. As a matter of fact, it's an inaccurate representation of what they can do. And so I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Director Skurlock. I feel like our subcommittee on assessments is shaping up just in this conversation. So thank you for that too. Representative Halt.
Thank you. It seems like my mute button is a mile away every time it's my turn. I appreciate the time to give some of my thoughts. I just really want to push back a little bit around assessments. I know assessments are never going to be perfect, but I do think that it is really important that we're monitoring what our students are learning, and especially important during this COVID learning gap. I have a tremendous amount of fear of what knowledge is being lost. I'm really worried for our teachers. When, Jennifer gets her students next year, what have they learned this year and the previous year, and what have they lost? And if we do not do assessments, I'm concerned for that. And I think that there has to be accountability as well. Having students that have had learning disabilities, like a dyslexic student, the essential skills tests were imperative for them to make sure that people did not just take them as the most difficult kid in the room to make sure that they learned. It's not if they learn, it's how they learn, and making sure that those essential skill tests were there to make sure that the system was accountable for my children was really, really important. And I worry that we are leaving aside some kids that may not get to be taught in the way that they need to, because they're more challenging to be able to get them to demonstrate their skills. I'm also concerned about the nationally normed college tests not being available, because I think that this is the way our students get into college, and this is where they get their scholarships, and this is how we provide an equitable opportunity for many of our students that may think that they are not able to go to college. And in Ben Lapine, we have always provided access to ACT for every one of our students. And we've tested every one of our kids, and we test above the national average every single year for the last 6 years. And it is important that those kids, I can't tell you how many of those children hadn't thought that they were going to go to college, but do go on to college because they are smart and they can qualify for scholarships and they can move forward. And so I'm extremely concerned about this. I also want to tell you that my daughter has learning disabilities, and she is dyslexic, and she was accommodated with time. These tests do accommodate children for time. They accommodate them for their situations and where they're at. They just need to be called out and make sure that we do that for those students. So I'm hoping that we continue with assessments to hold our system accountable, as well as make sure that our students have opportunities to get to college and that their trajectories are not changed due to this pandemic, because every kid should have an opportunity to reach their highest potential and their highest goals. And we should not allow anyone to be held back because of that. And that's a lot of the fear that I have. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Representative Helt. Director Gill, I'm conscious of your time, and I know that you have some other things to cover. So again, this is one of our tasks for the year to look at assessments. I have some people that I can see are passionate about it, and so you might be tapped for being part of that subcommittee to help give us all the multiple perspectives on this conversation. But I'm going to go ahead and let Director Gill move forward with the rest of his report.
Thanks, Chair Howard. So just one more piece on the assessments that I want to be clear that this is likely coming our way. We are planning to request a waiver from the U.S. Department of Education to suspend the ESSA requirement for the statewide summative assessments this spring as well. We believe that this is a really challenging time to offer any kind of assessment that would be considered high stakes for an individual student. We do agree that it is critically important that our educators know where their students are at in their performance. So what we have done is invested funds that we saved from last year's summative assessment in formative and interim models and assessments that our educators can use with students that are focused on Oregon standards on a regular basis to inform that, but not have that be about making high stakes decisions about any individual student. We also plan to back that up with some surveying tools that we would like to develop in partnership with community. We have some general constructs that we're thinking about that include students' access to learning resources, opportunity to learn, especially in key areas that those assessments would cover: reading, math, writing, and science. The self-efficacy beliefs and self-concept that our students have around their abilities in those areas, so that we can address those. And again, the engagement for our high school students, things like extracurricular engagement and post-graduation planning. So those are the things we think would be of value to learn about and to ensure that our educators have access to how their students are performing, so that they can, appropriately adjust instruction to meet student needs. We don't think the summative assessment assists in those ways, And we think that the summative assessment could be harmful in other ways, especially if we're making, based on this year's results, any kind of statewide decisions or individual student decisions based on the outcome of those assessments. This is a far more comprehensive waiver than we've seen from any other state. We will have this up for folks to give public comment to. We will be meeting with educator groups and community groups to improve it. And we'll talk about it with you in more depth as we move forward at our next meeting in December. Chair Howard, I just want to do a time check, both in terms of if there's a break that's needed, and or if you need me to provide maybe a written report for my other parts. So I was going to cover how the metrics changed, a few other updates on our Ready Schools Safe Learners guidance, some information about the governor's 2-week freeze and how that may or may not be impacting schools, and the complaint process. So this is probably at least 30 minutes worth of information. If I share it verbally, I'm happy to provide a written report if that's more helpful for the timing for the board.
My thought is that we have some breathability this day, given that the agenda was short. I know we have a hard stop probably, for lunch, and then if we do come back, we want to get done by 1:30 at the latest, 2 o'clock. That being said, my short answer is let's take a 10-minute break, and then we can come back and hear the next 30 minutes. I think it's really important. These are very important topics, and hearing them verbally and having the ability to ask questions is I believe at this time and the work of this board. So I see people nodding. So we'll take a break at 11:15, and we'll come back at 11:25.
Madam Chair, I'm going to need to say goodbye. I have to be on a National Association of State Treasurers meeting at 11:30. So thanks for the time. I'll see you all soon.
Thank you, Treasurer Reed.
Yep.
So we are officially on break. Thank you, Jason, for stopping the public session, and we will be back at 11:25. Welcome back from break. Thank you everyone for coming back. And we're going to continue with Director Gill's report.
Thank you, Chair Howard. So one thing, just on the last topic, one other thing to mention, we talked about College Possible and AVID and Aspire. There is also a program in Oregon and some others hopefully starting soon that are culturally specific. So one of those is Juntos, who's had really great success around graduation rates and college readiness for our Latino students across the state. So I think those are worth mentioning for sure. And jump into the Ready Schools Safe Learners, that's the RSSL metrics and updates. On October 30th, we announced new metrics for returning to in-person instruction in Oregon schools. We did that for a number of reasons. So if you remember back to our first set of metrics, we were one of the first states in the country to release metrics for returning to in-person instruction. So we didn't have other states to look to. We didn't have students in school in the United States. So we primarily, in partnership again with the Oregon Health Authority, looked to what was happening in other countries, in Europe and in Asia and the Pacific, to determine the best possible return to in-person instruction and reducing risk. At that time, we announced that 6 to 8 weeks into the school year, we would review those metrics and update with current information. In August, we already knew that each week we were learning more and more studies were being released about COVID-19. We had information at that time regarding the how COVID was transmitted between children and from children to adults that has over time changed and shown that young children do indeed get COVID and do indeed pass it to other children and to adults. But we also learned over time that school settings, whether they're here in the United States or here in Oregon, where we have currently around 60,000 students participating in in-person instruction, or in other countries, where they're doing that with significant public health protocols like face coverings, physical distancing, hand washing, cohorting of students, cleaning and disinfecting. When those things are in place in schools, we're not seeing transmission in schools. So we are seeing cases in schools, and we're seeing those here in Oregon also. So we have about 60,000 students participating in in-person instruction, and we've had around 100 cases in schools that have been identified. Those are students and staff members. We have rarely seen any transmission in the schools. So schools are pretty good at identifying, because there are screening protocols in place, checking for symptoms and asking students and staff about their contact with others and things like that. We're at that time when my neighbors are working on their yard, so hopefully that won't disrupt too much. So as we have this new data become available, it was time to take another look at our metrics. Through the work at the governor's office and the Oregon Health Authority, we are focusing on ensuring that our schools are ready to implement the public health protocols with fidelity. So things like delivering face coverings to them, making sure that we're meeting regularly and walking through what those requirements are. We're providing metrics that allow for in-person instruction, but at reduced level of risk. So I'll explain what I mean by that when we get to the slide on the new metrics. And then working with Oregonians, much like Chair Howard talked about in the beginning, we all have quite a bit of control over whether our students can return to in-person instruction. We know the steps that it takes to reduce spread, and if we implement those across the state, we'll be able to have more students in school. So I'll highlight kind of 5 areas and then walk through them quickly. These metrics became effective on October 30th, the same day we released them. This new metrics framework moves to a 2-week look back, and I'll talk about why and what that means. We also removed the statewide test positivity metric in favor of the county test positivity metrics, trying to make this more and more a local approach to the greatest degree possible. And there are times in here where it's at the county level and other times where it's even closer to the school level. We have created space where we can incrementally increase access for in-person instruction beginning at the elementary level, because that is a level where cohorting is more readily able to be accomplished than it is at the high school level and middle school level, where students are interacting with several different cohorts during the school day as they change cohort classes. It maintains the use of some exceptions outside the regular metrics, and there are longer implementation windows when school is transitioning between an instructional model. I think I'll move on from there. So the 2-week look back, when Oregon first created its metrics, one of the things we wanted to do was have communities look at the trend in their data. Are things getting better or are things getting worse in terms of COVID-19 spread? And so we initially created a look back of data at 1 week at a time over the last 3 1-week periods. Now, since that time, about a month after we released our metrics, the CDC released their set of metrics, and other states began to release theirs. Most other states centered around the CDC of a 14-day look back. So we moved to that model so we could be more easily comparative, primarily to what other states are doing in CDC. So people were getting very confused over what our metrics were in comparison to other states and the CDC. So now we're all on that same timeline. This is a picture of what the metrics look like. And I'll move a little quickly through this. The way that this works is that we look at the county case rate per 100,000 in population. So this happens for our large counties that are over 30,000 in population. And so it goes across here and it has different actions, which I'll walk through in a minute, based on the case rate. In our smaller population counties that have less than 30,000 people, we use a total case count. And this is much like the impact in our small schools. When you have a small school and you look at graduation rate, it tells a very different story than when you look at the number of students who graduated. If you have a class of 10 students and 2 students don't graduate, then 80%. That's very different than when a few students don't graduate in a class of 300. So we have some of our small population counties where one person getting COVID could account for a case rate of 40. And so that just didn't make sense for our small counties. So we made a different provision for them. And then everybody is held to the test positivity, which is this 4th column or 4th row here. So let me talk about the columns. When a school is in a county with a case rate in a large county of less than 50 or less than 30 cases, all K-12 schools can open to in-person instruction. It's a local decision, but they've met the metric and they can choose to open if it's safe in their, or they feel like the risk is low in their community. In this yellow section, the elementary schools can begin to open. And again, a local school decision, district decision, but they have met the metric for elementary to open to in-person instruction. We would say that they could start with kindergarten through 3rd grade if it's a large school, so that they get their protocols in place, that they get the sort of routines for students in place and staff. Sometimes it's harder to change staff behaviors than student behaviors, and adults who come in and out of the school and drop off students. So that's all really important to get in place, and then to begin to add more grade levels for elementary. Over time, if their elementary experience is that they aren't seeing transmission in school, so they're not seeing outbreaks over a 4-week period, which holds to what's happening around the world, that schools really aren't a high transmission place because they're a structured setting with all of these protocols in place, then they could also begin to open middle and high school, even in this yellow section. The orange section is a transition section. So if a school has been in a county that's been in green and yellow, and they've opened some or all of their schools or grade levels, and they now find themselves climbing in their county in case rates, they can keep their schools open if locally they're not seeing community spread. We ask them to work with their local public health authority to understand now, not just at a county level, but at a community level, what's happening there. They know that they're also kind of on notice. So the whole community needs to be aware that they may need to transition back to distance learning, because at this time, with the data that we're using, and this matches the CDC exactly, it becomes high risk when we get to this 200 case count, or 60 cases, or 10% test positivity, where there are just too many people with COVID-19 coming into the school setting, and it's less likely that all of those will be caught at screening. And then some of you were here prior to the meeting when Superintendent Sipe talked about the impact on a school. When you have something in person happening, and there is a person with a case and they've interacted with a cohort, then typically the people in close contact and the students in that cohort, they all quarantine for 14 days and go through testing processes. It's very disruptive to students and families and educators. And for the school, that oftentimes ends up closing them back down, because if they are have too many staff members that are close contacts, then they have no one to teach school. So they end up going back to distance learning.
Director Gill,
Yes.
Representative Helt has a question.
Thank you, Chair Howard. My question is around vaccines. Now that we are,
You can't type it down, probably have to write it.
now that we're
Okay,
putting.
well, let's get you some more paper so that way you can write it on a.
Hang on just a second. So we
You
have
do it here?
school going on at home. There we go.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. So now that we have a vaccine that is getting ready for distribution, probably in December, and we have a vaccination distribution plan for our state, how does that work into all of this metrics table? And what is your plan moving forward to make sure that we're able to do this with some fidelity and get kids back in schools as soon as possible with this vaccination on its way? And then secondly, I wanted to, last meeting, we talked about my county and how our numbers are not correct. And you are going to advocate or talk with Oregon Health Authority and the governor about getting our numbers back to what the population is, and we still have not seen that movement yet. So I'm wondering if you have any updates on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So to the first question, I think that is really critical. So we do hope that we have vaccine coming. We know that educators are now considered, sort of some of the first in line for the vaccine. As they serve our students in these settings, and it can help us to reduce the impact of when a case comes into a school. So we are reviewing that. We don't yet know the number of vaccines that are initially available. We know that there are other critical community members that will be high on that list, including our healthcare workers and our older folks in the country that need to have quick access to this vaccine. So we're like the rest of the country, kind of waiting to see what's available and when. And then we have committed to revisiting our metrics, both in terms of what we continue to learn about the spread of COVID-19. So if it turns out that what we're seeing currently around the world and in our country, that it's not transmitting in schools, we can look to that information. If that changes, we also need to consider that vaccine and what kind of support that offers, we need to consider. And then we're also continuing to hope for more and more quick access to testing and how that could also alter. So we're watching all those factors to see how they could help us adjust these metrics in the future. It's kind of like what I started the conversation with. We need to be ready to change that. Nothing will stay constant for a while. And then to your other question, so as I understand it from the conversations with the Oregon Health Authority, they use population numbers that are collaborated in partnership with the OHSU. And so they are aware that Deschutes County has named that they don't believe that that is the correct population number to be using, but they will continue to work on that effort.
Thank you, Director Gill. We have one more question from Board Director Scurlock.
Hi, thank you, Chair Howard. Hi, Colt, I have a question for you about, I guess, the on-site learning and distance learning idea. And so I just let me give you a brief scenario. So for example, I have over 40 students in one of my AP classes. And then I have 2 English 11 sections. I'm teaching part-time right now, but there's a lot of kids. What would that, I guess, look like? I'm trying to visualize like how, I'm like, I just can't figure out how it's possible. And so I just need a little guidance on how I can translate that to other teachers.
Yeah, so this gets into that's a really good question, and it gets into the reality of shifting into in-person instruction. So in especially many of our schools that are in more populated parts of Oregon, so think up and down the I-5 corridor and Bend Lapine area and a few other areas in the state, there are some pretty large classes, especially at middle school and high school. So many folks and some of the schools that are actually open are considering hybrid models where students are part-time at school and part-time learning from home. However, there isn't an increase in the educator workforce. So finding a manageable pathways where a teacher can be expected to be serving some students in person while also serving some students at a distance is being addressed in different ways in different school districts around the state. But these are also, this is one of the reasons, Director Scurlock, that these are all still local decisions. So when a community meets these metrics, they may still have other things that keep them from moving immediately to in-person instruction. So there needs to be collaboration between the educators in the school district and the administration, working towards plans that make sense and are plausible both for the educator and for the students and families. And to recognize that it is all a little bit more tenuous once you open your doors to in-person instruction as well, because you can be forced to move back quickly, at least at the cohort level, and perhaps even far more staff than that to an in-person or to an online model. So there are many, many challenges, and most of them are somewhat unique to the school setting and look different from elementary to middle to high, and depending on the school size. So there's not a single right answer, I don't think, across the state of Oregon. We do ask that in the development of blueprints for operating in person, that school districts work closely with their educators so that everybody's at the table naming the kinds of issues that you just called out and trying to problem solve together. I think that the hope that Representative Helt pointed out is that if we do have vaccines, it may be that the what it means to be together in a space looks different too. So having 40 students together in a classroom is quite a lot, and that would not really be possible right now unless you have an enormous classroom. You know, we have requirements that require at least 35 square feet of space for each individual. So you wouldn't have all 40 in a normal sized classroom at this time, but perhaps after vaccine and some understanding of its impact on the spread of COVID, things like that may become possible again. So.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. A couple of things that I just want to say about the general metrics, and I'll move us forward. One is that it continues to be important for us to think about impacts in different communities. So when a county has met the metrics, they may be there could be school districts there that operate schools that bring in students and or staff from another county as well. In Oregon, school district maps and boundaries don't align with county maps and boundaries. They're separate. And so many school districts cross county lines. So they need to pay attention to what's happening in both counties, because the last thing you want to do is have the school site be the place where you're now bringing in several people from a county that's highly impacted to a county that is not very impacted, and then opening up spread in a new county. So this continues to be an issue that we look to and partner with the Oregon Health Authority around. We do have some other important factors here. So one is that we have a safe harbor rule that we put into place. So if schools were open under the previous metrics, they are allowed to stay open under the current metrics. We don't think a school actually needed to use that because the new metrics are more open to in-person instruction than the previous ones were by quite a bit. In fact, during the development of the new metrics in early October, most of Oregon's counties, all but 2, were at one point in a place where they could be operating either elementary or all of K-12 in person. And nothing changed about the metrics during that time. What changed was the rapid rise in cases in Oregon. So as these were being developed, it was looking like we would have most of Oregon students in school. And then before we released them, it looked like there could be about 20% of Oregon students in school. And now it's far fewer than that because we've just seen this exponential increase in cases. So we just need to recognize that these metrics are far more generous to in-person instruction, but because of where Oregon's currently at, we're not in a place where we're seeing very much more in-person instruction. We also require now that school districts apply an equity-based decision tool as they consider changing from any learning model to the other, so on-site versus in-person versus hybrid, really thinking about the communities they serve and the challenges that any one of those changes will present for them, and how to try to provide supports for those students and families. The operational blueprints and weekly status updates so that we can understand who is in person and that they actually have protocols in place, all those are still required. You saw that long orange section in the metrics. That is to create a longer transition when school districts need to consider going back to comprehensive distance learning. And then we also implemented a 14-day window from the date metrics are met to the time that school districts might open to in-person. This was to keep districts from rushing in the minute that metrics were met. And that's really important because we want them to take time, maybe even time away from instruction, because of what the rules that the state board allowed. That's available to districts to take some time away from instruction so you can train, districts can train all of their staff, educators, educational assistants, custodial staff, on what it means to have students in the building and keep everybody safe. So that time is built in, and also to support families. So I'm going to skip through a couple of these just in terms of time. Let you know that there are exceptions to these general metrics. We continue to allow limited in-person instruction for specific groups of students at all schools in Oregon. We do ask schools that are in counties that are in that red column to really look carefully at the local COVID-19 impacts in their community before they continue when they're in the over 200 cases per 100,000 area. But it is possible to continue. We have specific exceptions for schools that are in very small or in very remote areas, for schools that are in counties that have both large populations but very low population density. And then waivers for in-person instruction for schools that were impacted by the wildfires. Now, when we released these on October 30th, one of the things the governor was really clear about is that it's her priority to get students back to in-person instruction and that all options are on the table to get there. And what she meant by that was all options are on the table to get our metrics, our data points in Oregon to a place where students could safely return to school. And now we're beginning to see some of that with the freeze that's in place. So I'll talk about that. Also important for you all to know, there are a number of other guidance documents that the department puts out for our schools. So there's a lot for them to keep up with and a lot of information to serve all students in our schools, students who experience disabilities and what to do when there is a case in a school and how to respond. So there's a lot of information out there. A few other just pieces that were changed in this metrics or in this update on the 30th was that we also included a new exemption chart that could be at the screening location in schools so that they would be able to support someone who did have symptoms and know what to do about that. There's some new face covering guidance. There's new cleaning and disinfecting guidance. There's new definitions. The key information that we shared about face coverings was that to update with where the CDC and OHA are at is that face shields alone, the plastic face covers, are not effective tools at reducing transmission because they don't stop aerosol. So they're acceptable only in a few cases where a person has a medical condition that prevents them from wearing a face covering, or when there are people who need to see a person's mouth in order to communicate. So using sign language or lip reading, those kinds of things, that's when that can be used. I'm going to move on to the governor's 2-week freeze. And note that, this freeze is in response to returning our students to in-person instruction, noting that at the time we put forward this freeze, we were seeing several days in a row of more than 1,000 cases a day. And in the previous week, there had been over 7,000 cases. So we saw a tremendous leap in cases in Oregon. Our hospitals were letting us know that they were nearing capacity in terms of their staff and beds. And so we were heading to a very dangerous situation in Oregon, and thinking about that as the winter surge. We also made it clear when these were released that they don't directly impact the education sector. So youth programs, higher ed, childcare, K-12 schools. There are some relatively minor impacts, and I'll kind of walk through those. But these new provisions did call for a travel advisory for individuals, sort of asking them, encouraging them to stay home or at least in their region and not to go to other states. And then if they do, to self-quarantine for 14 days after their arrival back in Oregon. I have asked schools across the state, private and public, to help with this. They're limited to a great degree because this is an advisory. It's not a requirement or mandate. But there are things we can do to communicate really clearly to both staff and families about the advisory. We can support the 14-day quarantine at screening by asking a question if people have traveled and making sure that they're aware that they should be self-quarantining for 14 days. So those things are happening and also create their own set of challenges for our schools and educators and school districts. This order went into effect yesterday and then remains in effect for the next 2 weeks. It'll continue to be reviewed after that 2 weeks is up to determine whether it needs to stay in place for some or all counties in Oregon. It has some pretty significant provisions. So social gatherings during this 2-week period should be held to a maximum of 6 people and a limit of 2 households. This is during the entire time. So not, I get to meet with one other household tonight for dinner and then on Saturday night have another household. It should be the same one. So your own small group for this 2-week period. Restaurants and bars are takeout only. Gyms and fitness organizations are closed. Any kind of indoor recreation, pools, sports courts, museums, all of those are closed during this 2-week period. Everyone still has access to retail, but they're asked to limit their capacity to about 3/4 of normal and really encourage things like curbside pickup or delivery. Our places of worship are still open and under the safety protocols, but asked to limit their services to 25 people if it's indoors, 50 people for outdoors. Venues for things like celebrations or fundraisers or weddings, those are closed during this 2-week period. And then folks are asked to work remotely, if at all possible, and close offices to the public. Outdoor activities are still fairly safe, but these outdoor spaces like gardens and aquariums and pools, those are closed because they have pinch points at restroom facilities, at entry and egress sites. So those specific places are closed, but you'll see again that outdoor recreation and sports are still allowed. Personal services, so this is like hair salons, tattoo, massage, those are still open. Those in Oregon and in most of the country are not common sources of transmission. Even though you're in close proximity, there are protocols in place and everybody's seems to be going along with wearing face coverings and things like that, and they're not seeing outbreaks in those areas. Long-term care, if you have loved ones in long-term care, they can still be visited, but it needs to be outdoors. Again, outdoor recreation and sports is allowed. There is guidance specific to it. And indoor recreation and sports is closed. Again, K-12 schools not highly impacted. I've named 7 things for our superintendents where we do have some impact. So again, we can be helpful around the West Coast travel advisory. We can emphasize the importance of entry and screening protocols as we have more than 1,000 cases a day coming in Oregon, ensuring that we're screening as closely as we can for symptoms and for all the screening questions about contact with people with COVID-19 becomes even critically more important to keep schools that are open to in-person open. Emphasizing these key practices, these are what allow schools to reduce transmission and stay open in the future. So we need to keep ensuring that we have physical distancing in place, even with face coverings on. When you're more than 6 feet away, you should still have face covering. Hand hygiene, cohorting, isolation and quarantine, cleaning and disinfecting, all of those remain critically important. We have updated K-12 athletics guidance. So schools that are operating in distance learning still have some access to outdoor training and conditioning and outdoor drills and running and those kinds of things are still available. Schools can implement those. When schools are open to in-person instruction, they can do all the outdoor sports, even competition, as long as those are non-contact or minimal medium contact sports. And all of that's defined in the sports guidance available to folks. We also ask folks to consider working from home. So in schools, that's a decision of the employers about how much of that is available and how much they promote that. Clearly, when students are on site and that's operating, then staff need to be on site as well. Typically in Oregon, there's a real mix in Oregon of when school is online, whether the teacher is at school providing that or in their home providing that. So some of that depends on the stability of internet, and school districts are making decisions about where staff are working from on that basis. And then schools oftentimes loan their facility or rent their facility to for other purposes, for church on the weekends or for other kinds of events. So they need to pay attention to those facility use agreements because there are a number of those activities that are limited or closed during this time. Just reiterating that it's 2 weeks for now. Data will be reviewed. We know the governor named that Multnomah County and some other hotspots will likely need to be in the freeze for at least 4 weeks, maybe longer. So we'll continue to watch that as we move forward and to recognize that this is not only being done to save COVID patients, but we need hospital space for people who are in accidents or who have other critical diseases and need support of a hospital and all of its services. So one more on the complaint process. One of the things that we did with this release was we shifted the responsibility for oversight on complaints away from the Department of Education and over to OSHA. And we think this was really helpful for a couple of reasons. One of those is that the department, when it was playing both a role of technical assistance and support for districts and a role where it would be determining whether a district is meeting the requirements and could withhold state school funding or have other consequences if a district wasn't, then that makes it more challenging to provide technical assistance. So now we're clearly in the technical assistance role, coming in, partnering with districts, helping them understand the guidance and providing supports around that. And OSHA will come in and they will investigate complaints and make determinations about any possible consequence. so that way our districts can feel free to connect with the department to provide support. We also were this way able to better provide anonymity for complainants. So if there is, for example, a staff member in a public or private school in Oregon that had a complaint, or even a family member or a student who wanted to provide a complaint and they did not want their name associated with it, the rules for OSHA have the ability to maintain anonymity for complainants, where for the Oregon Department of Ed, our public records policy doesn't fully allow for that. So that was helpful as well. Okay, I can stop there, Chair Howard, and answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Gill. We had quite a few sort of comments and questions interactively throughout the presentation and the report. So, but I'm going to just pause for a moment and scan the room to see if there's any last minute questions or comments. All right, thank you. Very thorough, very important. And we really appreciate the work of the staff of ODE and your leadership, Director Gill, in this very, very complex and trying time. We are going to move, we're going to make a couple of adjustments to our agenda based on guests that we have. And we're going to move directly to the consent agenda. And then we're going to move the Baker School District Transportation Waiver to the first adoptions. And then we'll do the board policy and procedure and board advisors, and then we'll end with the American Indian Alaska Native Student Success Plan administrative rules first. It'll be an adoption. So that is what we're going to do. And so if I can
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes. Lisa?
I apologize for interrupting. I did want to state, though, for the public who's watching, that they can access the board meeting materials, and we've posted that link in the chat box of the live stream. And when we have all the materials gathered, those will be posted and they'll available.
Thank you.
Thank you. They can access the board meeting materials, and we've posted that link in the chat box of the live stream.
Thank you. So we are going to, as practice with virtual meetings, I will call for a motion and then a second. We'll have Vice Chair Martinez Sabata will make the motion and it to be seconded by second Vice Chair Wheeler. And then Lisa will do a roll call. So I would like to move the call for a motion for the consent agenda at this time.
Yes, Chair Howard, I move the items on the consent agenda.
I second that.
That was a second from second Vice Chair Wheeler. All right, Lisa, will you please do our roll call?
Director Skurlock?
Here.
Director Russell?
Yes.
Director Colonna?
Yes, with a small comment. I would like to thank the Office of Teaching and Learning for all the work that they did on the Oregon Instructional Materials World Languages. I think they evaluated more than 46 different full curricular materials programs, and it was very well done. So just wanted to thank them for their good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Director Veliz?
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Wheeler?
Yes.
Vice Chair Martinez Zapata?
Yes.
Chair Howard?
Yes, aye. All right, so moved. The motion passes. Thank you. So now we're going to hear from the presenter of the Office of Child Nutrition, Research, Accountability, Fingerprinting, and Transportation, Brian Reeder. And the Baker School District Superintendent Mark Whitty will be joining us via the video conference to speak to this request and answer any questions. So we'll go ahead and begin conversation around the transportation waiver that is in our adoptions for the Baker School District.
Thank you, Chair Howard. I'm Brian Reeder. I'm in the office we call CRAFT. And I'm here today along with Mark Whitty and Buell Gonzalez of the Baker School District. The district is having difficulties finding enough buses and drivers to transport their students to school. And one of their proposed solutions is to allow their high school students who live more than 1.5 miles away from school to ride the city bus to school. In order to do that, they would require a waiver from ORS 327.043, which is the requirement that they transport high school students who live more than 1.5 miles from school. So that statute also allows for this board to grant a waiver of that requirement. And that is what the Baker School District is requesting today, is that waiver. And at this point, I will turn it over to Mark Whitty, who is the superintendent of the Baker School District. He can give you some more details.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate the board taking the time to consider this request. I believe you have a letter in front of you, most likely from us. So I'm seeing some nods. So you kind of got the gist of it. And I do want to introduce Buell Gonzalez. He's our transportation director, among other things. So he'll be helping answer some questions you may have. But the long and short of it is we're actually one of the schools that are in person. We're transporting quite a few students at this juncture. And so we have roughly 800 students in session right now. Pre-K through 6 is in full time, and we're under one of those areas that Colt Gill had described. So we're able to do that at least till January 4th. One of the challenges is managing the protocols. We're really are being very strict and with fidelity on the protocols with staff and our students. And we wanted to do the very best we could on transportation to make sure that we're following those protocols. Even though they do allow for some variance, we certainly are following all of those protocols. In doing so, each bus is about 1/3 of what we can normally transport on each bus. I think there is enough variance that we could move forward with that, but I do not want to, because it makes hardly any sense to pick up kids and drop kids off, not following all the protocols, and then requiring them to do so in school. So we want to be as true to the guidance as we possibly can. And so in doing that, we have had to utilize every single bus driver and sub driver that we have, and almost every bus to be able to spread out the students appropriately to make sure we're maintaining those protocols. And it would be very helpful if we could utilize Community Connections, which we have worked with their director, and they're very supportive of the notion of utilizing in-town transportation to the high school and Eagle Cap Innovative High School. And so that's what our request is. Buell, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, a couple things. And I don't know how much specifics we want to get into about some of those questions that were posed, but the stops are, outside the limit. The in-town stops are outside the limit, the distance, from the high school. So they're the three exterior, or the 3 furthest stops that are in town that we would, ask, Community Connections to help us with. So that's that. Did you want me to go into any detail about
Well,
the cost or anything?
we'll see if what questions you have. We would note that whether we get reimbursed or not is not the question for us. It's more about we're trying to figure out how to safely serve our students to the best of our ability. So if you have any questions, or Buell and I stand ready to try to help.
Any questions for our guests? Yes, Vice Chair Martinez Zapata and then Director Colonna.
Thank you, Chair Howard. Mark, I'm gonna call you Mark. I hope that's okay.
That's what I'm comfortable with.
Thank you. It's one of the questions that I had after reading the letter and hearing about the waiver request is about the reaction or perspective that the community and the families have had to this. Do you have any information on what families or how families are responding to the possibility of having transportation done other than by the school district?
Yeah, so we've had no issues when we've talked to families about this. In fact, they're highly interested in being able to get their children to school safely. And so that is the highest priority for them. It's just, as you probably well realize, it's difficult for families, and we have not had any issue with that. We don't anticipate it.
Thank you.
One of the selling points, obviously, that we've said was that they would be on the bus for a shorter amount of time, so they would be quicker. And we're utilizing, we would be utilizing the same stops that they're already using. So the kids, that we've been able to talk to specifically are happy for not having to spend longer times on the bus. So.
Yeah, and from our lens, I just want to mention contact tracing is one of the more challenging aspects of running the school in person at this juncture. And so we have everything in place to be able to utilize contact tracing in that system also, so that we'll have the ability to identify what day and who was on that particular bus.
I'm concerned. My question is because I'm concerned about any additional burden that might be put on families with regard to that transportation of whatever type, emotional and logistical and all of that. So that's the genesis of my question. And did I hear you correctly then, Buell, that the routes are staying the same, or they're adjusting to meet the routes of the school buses?
So the routes are the exact same as they were last year. And, as far as the burden goes, so the distance that the kids would walk to those stops is exactly the same. The times are adjusted a little bit because they don't need to be waiting there quite as long, which will be nice for them. Also, the cost is free. Community Connections received a grant, and this was a grant they received last year as well, that any high school student doesn't have to pay. So, which is great for the families, but it's also really good for the district.
Director Colonna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to reaffirm the idea that, Mark, you and your staff are going to continue to run your transportation system at the maximum that you can, given the situation that you have. You're not trying to cut back on anything, but you're trying to keep safety protocols in place by adding some public transportation. Is that correct?
Jerry, that's absolutely correct. We've maxed our capacity, and like everybody else, we're advertising for more bus drivers, but we're using everybody that has a CDL license right now. And so we definitely want to be able to relieve that burden by adding a little bit of assistance from in-town community connections.
And then secondly, Mark, in reading over the materials, and I'm not able to put them in front of me right now, but you would agree to an expiration date, would you not? When you find that you can go back to the regular service, it could even be this year, but more than likely it would be the end of this school year, so that you're not asking for anything permanent at all, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, may I get a motion?
Yes, Chair Howard, I move the board approve the Baker School District Transportation waiver request.
I second that motion.
All right, we have a motion from Vice Chair Martinez Zapata and a second from Second Vice Chair Wheeler to approve the Baker School District Transportation waiver request. So we're going to do a roll call, and all those in favor as you are called upon will say aye, and if you are opposed, please say no when Lisa calls on you. Thank you.
Director Skurlock,
Yes.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Colonna,
Aye.
Director Veliz,
Aye.
Second Vice Chair Wheeler,
Yes.
Vice Chair Martinez Zapata,
Yes.
and Chair Howard.
Aye. So the motion passes. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Superintendent Whitty and Mr. Gonzalez Jr. for joining us today, for answering our questions. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We are going to move on to the next adoption, which is our board policy and procedure manual revisions, policy number 102. And we are going to hear from, I'm scrolling through to make sure, we're going to hear from our board administrator, Lisa Pinero.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this docket is being brought to you in order for you to include and add an additional board advisor to your roster. This would allow for the seating of a K-12 elected school board member. So we just simply need to make changes to the board policy and procedure manual to allow that to happen.
Great, thank you, Board Administrator Pinero. Do we have any further discussion about that, or comments or questions? Oh, Representative Help?
Just being a longtime school board member, I think this is a great idea, and I just want to throw my support behind it. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Helt. Any other questions or comments or discussion? Hearing none, may I get can I get a motion?
Yes, Chair Howard, I move the adoption of the revisions to policy 102 of board policy and procedure manual.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Vice Chair Martinez Zapata and a second from Second Vice Chair Wheeler to adopt the revisions to policy number 102 for the board policy and procedure manual. We'll do a roll call. Thank you, Board Administrator Pinero. And if all those, when you are called, if you're in favor, say aye or yes. And if you are opposed, no. Thank you.
Director Skurlock,
Yes.
Director Russell,
Yes.
Director Colonna,
Yes.
Director Veliz,
Yes.
Second Vice Chair Wheeler,
Yes.
Vice Chair Martinez Zapata,
Yes.
Chair Howard.
Yes. So the motion passes. We now have the opportunity to recommend to you an elected school board member advisor to our to join as the State Board of Education as an advisor. And the leadership team Vice Chair Martinez Zapata and Second Vice Chair Wheeler and I have reviewed and looked at our candidates, and Brandy Pinner from the Newburgh School District School Board really shown out to us, and from her letter of intent, I wanted to share something that she shared with us. Statewide equity work is imperative, and that includes a focus on supporting our rural districts in this often contentious and painful work. And if we hope to create a state education system that serves all students, we must include our rural communities in that. We must all have their participation and engagement if we are to have any hope of addressing hundreds of years of state-sanctioned oppression. So we welcome your voice, and we are available to any questions or comments. Thank you for being here. So opening up for any questions or comments for Ms. Pinner. Yes, Director Russell.
Yes, I'd just like to welcome Ms. Penner and tell her how much I appreciated reading the remarks that she made in her application, and thank the executive committee for making such an excellent choice. A number of years ago, I did have the opportunity to spend some time in the Newburgh School District. After I had retired, I had the opportunity to serve as a superintendent mentor and spent some time a number of years ago with the new superintendent at that time, and had the opportunity to work with some of the board members and some of the staff and get a chance to know and understand a little bit about that community. And so I'm exceptionally pleased to see you come aboard and bring that perspective. And I particularly like the fact that you will bring that rural perspective and can bring a smaller district perspective as well. So welcome aboard. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I, for those of you who might not have been able to see it, I not only serve as the chair of the Newburgh School District Board of Directors, but I'm also the Oregon State School Board Association regional representative for Yamhill and Polk counties. And so that has really given me some insight into a little bit of a larger perspective outside of just Newburgh. And, you know, there's some very small school districts in the area. I always think of Perrydale, it's 300 kids, you know, K-12 superintendent is high school principal sort of setup. So yeah, I'm incredibly honored, and I really look forward to serving the board. Totally open to other questions as well.
Thank you, Ms. Pinner. Are there any other questions or comments? We're very excited to, if there are no other comments or questions. Oh yes, Student Representative Novoa.
I just had a quick question. Have you ever been a part of the education system outside of Oregon?
Well, as a student, yes. I grew up in Washington State. So I went to public schools in Vancouver, Washington, and I attended Washington State University. It's my undergraduate. And I'm currently enrolled at Gonzaga, getting my master's in leadership. So my personal experience has been in Washington, but professionally just in Oregon.
Great.
Yeah, great question.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Representative Helt.
I just wanted to say welcome and thank you for your service. I know those weekends away in Salem as I was on that board for many, many years. So thank you. And it is a great group of people. And I'm glad to have you as a bridge between this board and that board. So thank you so much for taking the time to advocate for our kids.
Thank you. Yeah, you can understand. I actually miss some of those weekends away in Salem right now. You know, it's great to have virtual, right? But I have 3 kids here at home, and I'm not going to lie, it was nice to get out of town sometimes away from them. But thank you.
Well, I echo what Representative Helt said about being a bridge. We welcome your thought partnership to this board, so thank you. And if there is no further discussion, then let's make it official, and may I get a motion?
Yes, Chair Howard, I move the board approves Brandy Penner to the position of school board advisor to the board.
I second that motion.
Great. So we have a motion from Vice Chair Martinez Zapata and a second from Second Vice Chair Wheeler to approve Brandy Penner to the position of school board advisor to the Oregon State Board of Education. So all those in favor during roll call will say aye, and all those opposed will say no. Lisa?
Director Skurlock,
Yes, and welcome.
Director Russell,
Absolutely, yes.
Director Colonna,
Yes, and congratulations.
Director Feliz,
Yes, and welcome.
Second Vice Chair Wheeler,
Yes.
Vice Chair Martinez Zapata,
Yes, welcome, Brandy, and I am so excited to have your enthusiasm, especially for issues on diversity, equity, and inclusion on our board. Thank you.
and Chair Howard.
Aye. So motion passes. Thank you very much. And we will, you are welcome to stay on the rest of the meeting and continue to listen in. And we're going to move on to our next adoption, which is the teacher advisor. And this is also a very important advisor and thought partner to this work. Given that we have Director Skurlock representing, teachers that are teaching our older students, it was important to us that we find a teacher that represents either teaching the younger kids or sort of the broader spectrum. But also given that, as we heard from Director Gill, and we've just put on our strategic initiatives, that bilingual education and working toward compulsory bilingual education for across the state, having that perspective on our board during this time is also incredibly valuable. So we are recommending Monica Rosario Bergman, who, as she shared a very great story about her mother, who was an immigrant to this country and sort of understood firsthand how difficult it was to come here and not speak the language. And she joined her mother in her work as a social worker for a migrant education program. And it was witnessing her mom meeting people exactly where they were and offering them space to honor them and their heritage and their language without judgment. Monica was inspired by that. She brings a wealth of experience and also serves as a bilingual special, I can't remember the exact title, in the Central Oregon ESD. So if there I don't believe that Monica is on the call anymore. I believe that there was, because of our timing issues, she was here and then had to go. But if there are any comments that anyone would like to make after having read her information that we shared in the board packet, this would be the time to do so. Yes, Director Skurlock.
Hi, thank you so much, Chair Howard. It is an honor and a privilege to have an individual represent not only our bilingual community, but represent the heart of education around what it means to serve all students, what it means to accept and to honor beautiful cultures and diversity within our institutions of study. And I'm truly excited to have Monica on board with our group. I think she will be a huge asset, and what an honor to have that represented so beautifully on our board. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Skurlock. Any other comments or further discussion? All right. Seeing no hands or chats, I'm going to go ahead and call for a motion.
Yes, Chair Howard, I move the board approves Monica Rosario Bergman to the position of teacher advisor to the board.
A second.
So we have a motion from Vice Chair Martinez Zapata and a second from Vice Chair Wheeler to approve Monica Rosario Bergman to the position of Teacher Advisor to the Oregon State Board of Education. During roll call, as all in favor will say aye and any opposed will say no. Thank you, Lisa.
Director Skurlock,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Colonna,
I am very happy to see an ESD staff member represented.
Director Veliz,
Aye.
second Vice Chair Wheeler,
Yes.
Vice Chair Martinez Zapata,
Yes.
Chair Howard,
Aye. So moved. The motion is passed. Welcome, Monica. We look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. And also welcome again to Grandy as well. So we're going to move to our adoption of the administrative rules for American Indian Alaska Native Student Success Plan. And we have presenters Delana Otherbull and April Campbell from the Office of Indian Education.
well, let me double check to make sure they are here.
I see their names, but they may have stepped away from, well, actually, I don't see April's name. Well, how about we do this? This, I believe, is our last agenda.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, great. Okay.
Great, thank
Okay.
you.
Sorry,
Thank you.
I wasn't made the presenter, so if somebody could make me the presenter so that I can share my PowerPoint.
Absolutely. Can we make that happen?
Okay, you should be able to, Delina.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. All right, I will start it now. Okay, can everybody see my my PowerPoint?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. I was on standby, so I know that we had a small shift in the schedule.
Yes. And then we got here earlier than we expected, so thank
Yeah.
you for your flexibility.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Delina Otherbull. I'm Crow in Northern Cheyenne, and I serve as the coordinator for the Native American Student Success Plan with the Office of Indian Education. And so we are coming today to bring you our permanent administrative rules and just share with you some of the changes that we've had since our first reading, which was last month. So our current rules for our American Indian Alaska Native Student Success Plan were adopted as temporary, and they're set to expire next month in December. And they were created to really just provide the foundation and the framework for our plan, our state plan, to be implemented. Our plan was adopted in May 2020, and that's a 5-year plan that is really providing us the guidance and direction that we want to see student success go for our AIAN youth. So this is the second reading of those rules. The proposed rules really are furthering establishing our criteria and our processes for the grant opportunities that are coming with our plan. And overall, they'll be supporting the strategies and objectives in the plan. So we currently have 2 RFAs out. We had to extend the deadline for both RFAs. So we have one RFA that is focusing on the strategies and objectives of our student success goal, and that's looking at a number of different factors that we believe really center student success. that is identification. So we're hoping that some of our applicants will be able to help us in increasing accurate identification of AIAN students. It's also looking at attendance, disproportionate discipline. It's looking at transitions, and just throughout the educational journeys of our AIAN students, looking at the critical areas that they need to be supported. We also have an RFA out for educator success, and that initiative is really focused on building the capacity of our educators, as well as recruiting and retaining AIAN educators in our Oregon school systems. We recently extended the deadline to center the needs of our tribes and entities wishing to apply. There were a number of factors that went into making that decision. In order for some of our tribal programs and tribal departments to submit an application, they had to work on getting approval from tribal council or from their tribal leadership. And so allowing 30 days wasn't enough time for some of our tribal representatives to get the entire application together and the approval that they needed to submit. We are also providing direct non-competitive grants to support Indigenous languages to each of the 9 tribes. And so this is a set amount that we're giving to the different tribes, ranging from $50,000 to $100,000, depending on the need of the tribe. We're looking at providing funding for, if a tribe does not have an active language program, we're looking at providing funding so that they can do an assessment and really evaluate what the needs are for their community and how to not only design and develop a language program, but actually implement it. And we're also providing funds to tribes who already have an active language program to really look at expanding or building off of the program that they have already in place, and or getting some of their educators, their language educators licensed so that they have that accreditation. Some of the major updates and changes to our rules, we revised some of the language, again, to make sure that it's clear, consistent, and rooted in strength-based frameworks that really work to serve the long-term goals of our AIAN Student Success Plan. We also updated and expanded the definitions that are consistent with other ODE Student Success Act plans and administrative rules. And what we did is our team participated on ODE's Equity Terminology Work Group, which is comprised of leadership within ODE, as well as community-based leadership and representatives from schools, community-based organizations, districts, ESDs, to really create a framework for making sure that the definitions and the terminology that our rules are utilizing are leveraging language that is rooted in community strength, resilience, and honoring equity. So making sure that we're using language that really honors the self-determination and autonomy of our communities. We also worked to increase the clarity on funding eligibility and criteria and our priorities to make sure that it's a very smooth transition from the administrative rules into actually creating the RFAs and the grant agreements. And we proposed changes for the rules to allow for multiple RFAs and more flexibility in awards. We've been working directly with the several tribal nations in Oregon and making sure that some tribes are on, their language programs might be in kind of different levels. Some are just starting, some have been established for 15, 20 years. And so really making sure that we can be flexible in how we award those funds. We also have proposed an increased admin rate of 15% for tribes. And this really came from the feedback when we initially opened our RFAs. We had a 5% indirect rate. And the feedback that we received from the tribes directly, as well as some community-based entities, was that they wouldn't be able to apply for funding with a 5% indirect rate. So we have, with your board packet and the docket that I submitted, you will see the feedback directly from tribes stating why the need for the increased admin rate. And much of the feedback was that they would have to make up the indirect costs from other programs or from general funds, which would take away from other critical services that are being provided within community. We also heard feedback from our advisory committee and those who work directly with community-based organizations that the 5% admin rate would be too low for them. And it really created a barrier of accessibility because of equity. And they felt like they couldn't compete getting a 5% admin rate to larger organizations who could take on a 5% admin rate. And so we really wanted to center equity and inclusion in making sure that the indirect rate was not a barrier for our community-based organizations to apply. And we started really looking at this feedback because we did have a low application submission rate. We had anticipated awarding 20 grants under our Student Success RFA, and we only had 8 eligible applications. And so when we had taken our concerns to different spaces, such as our advisory committee and our education cluster with Gov2Gov, and really trying to solicit feedback from community as to why people weren't applying for the RFAs, the main barrier was the indirect rate. And so through this process, we've really had many teachable moments. We've really looked critically about how we're creating access to the funding to make sure that regardless if it's a very small community-based organization working with our rural AIAN students, or it's a large organization in our metro area, everybody has equal access to the funding. So our 2 overarching goals, again, are Native student success. This is primarily focusing on all our students who are enrolled all the way from early learning to post-secondary institutions to CTE programs. And so really looking at providing funding that is going to support the relevant, rigorous learning opportunities that truly foster at the center of its initiatives, equity and excellence, so that our AIAN students can succeed. With our educator success, again, we're looking at making sure that all of our educators and staff through early learning to post-secondary have that high performing culture where they have the training, they have the capacity building, they have the support and professional development to contribute effectively to AIAN student success. With that, I would like to ask if there are any questions for our proposed permanent rules.
Do we have any questions or comments for? Yes, Director.
I'm sorry, I couldn't tell whether you called my name or somebody else.
Oh, no, yes, you, Director Russell, sorry.
Oh, okay. So Delana, my curiosity question is the letters the feedback that you had about the administrative rate also implied that even 15% might not be enough, particularly for some of the smaller applicants. Are you happy that with the 15%, and does that seem to be something that the advisory committee and others feel okay with?
So at this moment, we understand that it is still a little bit too low. I wanted to try to pull up the feedback. We still understand that it is a little bit lower than we have some tribes and organizations that have a 24 or 25% indirect rate. And it's just, I think on a larger scale, ODE is really looking internally at increasing their indirect rates to support more equity in the different types of funding opportunities that come out of ODE. We did discuss that some of the plans, some of the ODE state plans have lower indirect rates, such as 10% for the Latinx Student Success Plan and 6.5% for the African American Black Student Success Plan. So I know that they're actively working to increase all of them higher because of centering equity and making sure that it's not becoming a barrier for those to apply for funding.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for Delena? Yes, Director Feliz.
Thank you for all of your work that you've done on this, and on countless others, I'm sure, that have put a lot of time in this. I really like the language piece. You know, we have a dual language here in Woodburn, but I'm really excited about. We've had visitors from the Umatilla area, and I thought it was super exciting to hear about the work that they're doing, and if that can be expanded all over the state, and maybe it is already, that's great. And I want to just echo what board person Russell said about the administrative fee. I get to work with a lot of nonprofits, and again, this, though, you know, in the COVID world, right, and the fires, and what was before wasn't enough, and it's even more so because, and again, I know you're not a community-based organization like that, but I'm just saying is that those administrative fees have been traditionally low in communities of color. And I don't know if they're low everywhere, but that's who I work with, and puts a lot of strain on organizations. You know, when they, the need is there, and the will is there, and the ganas, as we say in Spanish, the desire to, and they usually say yes, but there's always at a great cost, you know, with people of color and organizations that work for them and represent them. So I strongly encourage ODE and others who are maybe listening to really take a strong look at that, because that has been an issue in the communities of color, I know, for decades. And I think it's time to right that ship. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that ODE has been working to gather information from the various community-based advisory committees, from the Rules Advisory Committee, and just seeing how the process is working during the different grant cycles, and working to create more alignment, especially with the different Student Success Act plans. It's really important in centering equity to ensure that our indirect rates are not the ultimate barrier for our communities and our communities of color from accessing these funds. Thank you for your question.
Yes, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments before we move to a motion? All right. Seeing that there are not, I call, may I get a motion?
Yes, Chair Howard, I move the adoption of the administrative rules for the American Indian Alaska Native Student Success Plan.
Second.
So we have a motion, and we have a second from Chair Martinez Zapata and a second from Vice Chair Bridget Wheeler. We'll go ahead and do a roll call, and all those in favor will say aye. And all those, oh, excuse me, I need to say what the motion is for, correct? So we have a motion and a second for adopting the Alaska, the American Indian Alaska Native Student Success Act plan. And we'll go ahead with the roll call, Lisa. Thank
Director Skurlock,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Colonna,
Aye.
Director Veliz,
Aye.
Second Vice Chair Wheeler,
Aye.
Vice Chair Martinez Zapata,
Aye.
Chair Howard.
Aye. So the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have one more agenda item. No, we don't.
Oh, we don't.
We do. Wow. Okay. So thank you. What a rich conversation today. Lots of very reflective sharing in the beginning. We really want to just say thank you. I echo, I believe it was Student Representative Novoa who said she just enjoys coming to this, or maybe it was one of the students said, seeing all of our faces. And I want to echo that, and the technology that allows us to continue to gather in this space. But I also want to thank everyone for holding space for this today, and for the very important work that the board is doing. We want to also thank our and welcome again our new advisor, our school board advisor, Brandy Pinner, and our teacher advisor, Monica Rosario Bergman. Thank you, and we'll look forward to having you be part of these conversations going forward. I thank Director Gill for the recommendation that we take a moment at the end of our director's reports to just breathe and absorb what we've heard, because again, it's the thought leadership is just inspiring. The Council for Educational Opportunity for Military Children will meet at 9 a.m. on Thursday, December 10th. And then our board meeting will follow and begin at 10:15. And so just wanted to note that for public record. And with that, I believe that we are at 12:55 adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good Thanksgiving potlatch and enjoy the fall. The colors are gone, the trees are bare now, but enjoy the promise of spring after we all rest through the winter. Have a good one. We'll see you in December.
Stay healthy, everyone.